Oh dear, lots of hilarity. Oh no, Janet. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Southdown National Park Authority's Planning Committee. My name is Heather Baker, and I'm the chairman of this committee. The Planning Committee is not a public meeting. It's a meeting held in public. The purpose of this meeting is for the committee members to listen to the officers' presentations and the public speakers before debating the issues and coming to a decision on the items on today's agenda. I'd like to remind all members and members of the public, please, that the SDNPA members have a primary responsibility for ensuring the authority furthers the national park purposes and duty. Members regard themselves first and foremost as members of the authority and will act in the best interests of the authority and of the park, rather than as delegates representing the interests of their appointing authority or any other interest groups. During the meeting, you may see members using their tablet or phone. Please be assured this is to review background information, such as the local plan, maps or plans of the application under consideration, or other associated planning documents. To minimise disruption, may I ask you to switch your mobile phones to silent? And can I please remind members and officers to speak clearly and directly into the microphone and bring the microphone forward if necessary. I hope everybody in the audience can hear me at this moment. Please put your hand up or make some sort of noise if you can't hear, and then we'll try and improve the situation. Can you not hear? Can we be louder? Can we turn it up? We'll try. Turned up? Is that any better? Good. So we'll move on to the agenda now. And item 1 is apologies for absence. Antonia Cox will not be joining us. We haven't had apologies from Janet.
In the indoctrination that she did start today.
Oh, right. So, okay, thank you.
Well, you know what I mean, you know, signing the
Thanks, Gary,
yeah.
yes.
She's not been put up against the wall, you know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
Induction, that's the word.
Signing a life away for another year, yeah. Thank you, Gary. Declarations of interest. Does anybody have a declaration of interest? Robert.
I've got a declaration of interest on item 9. It's a public service interest because I'm an East Hants District Councillor and involves the relationship with the authority in which I sit. Thank you.
Thank you. Joan? Could you put your microphone on, please?
A similar interest. I'm a Horsham District Council
Thank you.
councillor.
Daniel? Joan, can you turn your microphone off, please?
Yes, Madam Chairman, as a Lewis District Councillor, I have a public service interest in respect of items 7 and 9.
Thank you. Stephen?
Likewise, Chair, item 9, Arran District Council.
Thank you. Gary?
Likewise, item 9, Mid Sussex District Council.
Thank you. All complete? Good. Move now to the minutes of the previous meeting held on April the 9th. Does anybody have any comments about those meeting minutes? If not, I will sign those as read. Thank you. So we can, item 4, updates on previous committee decisions. Rob.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've got 4 with regard to applications, and I'll pass over to Claire, who's got a policy update for you. Members, we have had 4 decisions issued in relation to applications which came before committee. The first one was regarding Hare Lane at Twyford, which was a couple of years ago where this came before committee, but it's taken a while to sort of negotiate and sort out with regard to the new nitrate issues as far as that's concerned and getting that sorted. But that's been issued. That was for the conversion of stables to tourist accommodation. We have issued the decision for Clarefield Copse in Nywood, which was the temporary camping facilities, which came to you in February of this year. I think it was, or March. Could have been March. Okay, but we've issued the decision on that one. We've also issued the refusal of the application for Corhampton Golf Club. That was issued very soon after committee last month, as was the application for Woods Yard, Rose Cottage, Rackham Road, Rackham. So those decisions have been issued, and I'll pass over to Claire now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, the first item is to do with the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan, which you'll recall has been to this committee a number of times over the last few years and has been in examination for most of last year. We've received a positive inspector's report recommending that be adopted. So that arrived during the pre-election period, so we weren't able to publish it until after the elections. Hence, it's not come formally to this committee. So it is perhaps unusually going straight to the next National Park Authority meeting in July for adoption, so you will see it at that point. It would be remiss of me not to remind members that we've actually started our Regulation 19 consultation on our own local plan, and there are little booklets just outside on the table if you want to take them, and that goes for members of the public as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. Urgent items, we don't have any, so we can move now straight to development management. First application is on the screen in front of you, which is erection of 13 residential dwellings at Downvale Nursery. And Richard is going to take us through the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, all. Before I start the presentation on that specific item, I've been tasked with just giving members an overarching position on the authority's housing land supply. I've put it's being considered now because it relates to all DM items that you're considering. And within those reports, there is also commentary about the housing land supply position as well. So it's just an overall reminder. So based on our latest assessments of housing need, there's a requirement for 323 homes per year. And as I say, that's based on need, not from the adopted local plan. Consequently, based on permissions, completions, etc., the authority can demonstrate a 4.8-year housing land supply, which accounts for previous undersupply and deliverable unimplemented planning permissions and local plan allocations. So we don't have a 5-year housing land supply as per the NPPF. I would, however, stress that it's an interim position, and once the new local plan is adopted, we can include all the new allocations. At that point, we will have a housing land supply of 5 years. Why is that important? Well, the NPPF, paragraph 11, is engaged in the absence of a 5-year housing land supply, and there's 2 criteria within that paragraph, which you can see there. Why is it important to set this out? Well, the NPPF sets out that where you do have a position of policies which are out of date, or we can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, what's called the tilted balance sets out that applications should be strongly favoured for approving development unless adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So in effect, does the development have a significant impact on the national park that it would provide a strong reason for refusing it in the absence of balancing factors? Yes, normal planning balance applies. No, the tilted balance applies as set out in terms of a presumption in favour. So if we're dealing with allocated sites, as with item 6, in effect, the scheme has to be incredibly bad to refuse, to some extent, is a good way of summarising it.
Richard, could I just stop you there? You finished that comment?
Yes.
About that. I'd just like to stop you there, because if anybody's got any specific questions about that position, now might be a good time to just air them. If we're all comfortable and content and happy, Gary.
Thank you, Chairman. I was actually glad Richard mentioned the tilted balance, because that's been the bane of every district and borough across the country. But it is true, though, unless it's incredibly bad, you're using your words, you've got to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan.
I wonder if Richard can just explain to us where we stand in relation to this. As we all, as it were, more or less know, it has been the case always I'll say, up to the current manifestation of the NPPF, that in spite of the position you've explained, which is the sort of general position up and down the land, the position in national parks has been, in terms of obligation to provide, has been eased by other things that the PPFs have always said about protection of the national parks in particular, and the highest level of landscape value and so forth. I wonder if Richard could just comment for our benefit as to whether there is now, and what, and indeed for the benefit of those listening, whether there is anything which, as it were, eases that pressure and treats us as a national park rather differently in terms of restrictions on housing development than other planning authorities outside national parks.
Okay, thank you. Richard? Or
I'm
Claire?
going to pick that one up, sorry. Yes, so essentially if you're outside of a national park, you jump straight to that D2 and you're applying the tilted balance as Gary has just said. The advantage that we have as a national park is that we can look at one first. So if there is harm caused to the national park, then we might not end up at the tilted balance. So that's the sort of the way the NPPF navigates that special consideration to give to national parks.
Emphasis on the word may, not will. Andrew?
Yes, I think it's most unfortunate, both to ourselves and indeed more so for those authorities and outside protected landscapes, that we effectively have to permit things which are not good enough in a real world. I say a real world. There's, whenever you look, so much modern development is poor, and it isn't. It is the fact that it is poor which often creates the concerns of people, or the perception that it will be poor, rather than the fact it's actually being built in the first place. And I think there's nothing we can do about it, but it'd be right to flag it up.
Indeed. And of course we do strive for excellence in the park. Stephen?
I was just going to make a final comment, really. Okay. The 4.8 years, as a context, is actually fairly marginal below the 5 years, and we're in a much better position than perhaps our neighbouring or national authorities, where they can't demonstrate anything near that. So in that respect, you could apply a degree of weight to what you give to the 5-year land supply. So it's just that point to make as well.
And it is interesting that there's a perception that we don't develop in the park, but in fact, given that situation, that's just showing what we have achieved in the last few years. Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. I would just like to drill down a little bit into what incredibly bad actually means. I mean, are we talking incredibly bad in ecological terms, in aesthetic terms, public safety, or is it our policies as a whole? I mean, incredibly bad is a very difficult concept when you're thinking about balance. So do we have any steer or examples?
I think, Chair, it's all the policies together. You've hit the nail on the head, and that's what you're doing daily in making your decisions in any case. So it's not incredibly bad against one particular policy. It's looking at them in the round.
Thank you. Daniel?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Richard, you just said that you can take account of the fact that 4.8 is almost 5 in your judgment. Can the fact that, well, bullet point 3, that we will soon hopefully have a local plan that will make this problem go away, is that also an area where we can exercise judgment in determining what we have to do, or is that completely just sort of to be ignored because it's not yet in place?
Thank you. I think unless Claire corrects me, it depends on what degree of weight you give to the new local plan. The allocation numbers are certainly higher. I think it's about 6,700 new homes. So I think it really comes down to what weight you give to the emerging policy.
Right, I think we'll go on now to the rest of this presentation. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I start my presentation, I would just like to draw members' attention to the update sheet for item 6. Firstly, my apologies. There are a number of pages and there were a few late consultation responses, particularly highways, which also required a response to be included in the update sheet. I won't go through all of it, but I would just like to draw members' attention to the conditions, really, primarily. And there are, most pertinently, updates to conditions 8 and 9 relating to drainage.
Richard, I suspect you can't be well heard at the end
Right.
of the room.
Okay. The update sheet includes a number of updates. Those relate to additional consultee responses and officer comments, and also just various corrections. All I would draw members' attention to really is the conditions that are included in there that are proposed with amendments. I won't go through those, but obviously happy to answer questions.
Oh, Robert.
Can I ask a question? I'm just looking at the update sheet. This holding objection from highways is quite a material change from what was in front of us until this morning. And I'm just interested in why we're even discussing it when we got a holding objection from one of our principal consultees, given the fact that it wasn't in the papers, it's only on the update sheet, that's new today. Why are we not deferring this until we sort that out?
I think it's a good question.
I would like to cover that in my presentation, if I may.
Okay, yep, okay. We'll come back to it, Robert, if we need to.
Thank you, Chairman. So I would, in terms of the structure of my presentation, I'd like to cover site and surroundings, the proposals, and the 3 main considerations that can be seen on the slide. Obviously, the report has a wider breadth of issues, but those are the ones I would like to focus on. So the application site is a 1 hectare or 0.9 of a hectare site on the western side of Droxford. It's the site of a former horticultural nursery, and that has been vacant for a number of years. And as we saw on the site visit, it's becoming increasingly overgrown and unkempt. In the northern area of the site, there is an area of Japanese knotweed, and particularly representations from local residents raise concerns about that, and that would be addressed. The site abuts the conservation area boundary, which you can see outlined in black. The site boundaries are defined by mature trees and hedging, primarily. None of the trees, particularly the mature ones along the boundary, are TPO'd. We have Droxford School just immediately to the west. We have the recreation ground, also very close to the site. And then these properties are those on Police Station Lane. And then the site, as it exists, is accessed via Park Lane, with the access approximately here. The Wayfarers Way also runs past the site and out of Droxford to the west here. Just to refresh members from the site visit, really, this view is along Park Lane. This is the site frontage. You can see the substantial hedgerow. That's the view down here. That hedgerow would be lost. Here you have the existing access, and as I'll show on the plans, there is some repositioning of that in terms of the proposed layout. This is looking towards the northwest corner with the school just on the opposite side of the site here. This is further down that western boundary. Again, you can just sort of see the end of the school buildings. And then this view is roughly from the middle looking northwards, so it's the northern part of the site. Looking in the opposite direction, this is the southern area of the site, and points to note is the large conifers surrounding it that would be retained. The western boundary is quite overgrown, so really the purpose of this photo is really just to say that you do, at present, sort of get glimpses of existing properties on Police Station Lane. And then the bottom view is from the Wayfarers Walk, indicated by that red arrow. Just as a point of reference, I think the top of that tree is that element there. So the site is actually behind existing vegetation on the western side of the school. So it's not hard up against the edge of Droxford, where it would be perhaps readily seen, at least this time of year. By way of context, we've got policy SD 65 in the local plan, which allocates the site. The bullet points on the right-hand side are summaries of the policy criteria. I won't go through all of them, but it's approximately allocated for 26 dwellings. Within that design, it asks for a suitable transition in built form through the site. Also, environmental considerations in terms of reducing any surface water impacts and no significant harm to groundwater, and also effectively have sufficient parking on site in the scheme. So how have we arrived at where we are? As summarised in the report, since the site's allocation and the local plan's adoption in 2019, there have been two intervening pre-apps with us, and the summary of the key issues are in section 2 of the report. As a sort of headline point, the earliest scheme that came to us originally proposed 37, but it was reduced down to 26. So this is notionally how a scheme of 26 might be accommodated, albeit the units are relatively small and tight together. So there is quite a high density there. The 2022 or 23 pre-app actually swung the other way, and we had a much smaller scheme of 7 large detached properties. Some of the issues there really was actually 7. We thought as officers it was underdeveloping the site with a poor housing mix, for instance. The other thing just to note in terms of highways as well is you can see in the pre-app how, particularly with the 26, we had quite a large wide access onto Park Lane, and I'll come on to that in the proposed scheme. So subsequent to those pre-apps, the application was submitted for a scheme for 9 dwellings, and that unusually was, ordinarily we do see schemes up to the allocation amount or even beyond, but it was the developer's view at that time that actually, because of drainage technical constraints, they felt that 9 units was an appropriate balance. However, through good collaboration throughout the application process, we looked at the scheme and the technical constraints in much further detail, and what is before you is a scheme for 13 with a better housing mix, a predominant mix of 2s and 3s, and a range of typologies. So we have terraced properties right through to semi-detached and detached. Also within that, through the viability aspects, we have 6 discount market sales units proposed at 30% discount. The scheme is also seeking to, or does, try and reflect Droxford's characteristics, both in terms of layout and architecture. So one of the characteristics is properties quite close to the road, or even elements of them framing roads. So you can see we have a much tighter access with the property bordering onto that. Another characteristic of properties being close is either small gardens or really only railings in some cases. So we've really tried to reduce the frontage gardens. Firstly, it helps to maximise rear garden space, but also instill that character. So for these semi-detached units, you can see they actually have no front gardens at all, and there's just a series of minimal sort of bollards. And that's a characteristic of Droxford. We also have the drainage field of some sort of 680 square metres in here and a little bit of open space. The open space isn't huge, but of course the site is immediately adjacent to the recreation ground as well. I think one of the positives as well is creating, a good new street scene on Park Lane, but also because of how the drainage has worked out, you actually get properties backing onto the school, perhaps, which is better than having them perhaps immediately backing onto the residential rear garden boundaries on School Lane. And then finally, there's in total 33 parking spaces contained within carports or individual garages, and some on-street parking. They would have green roofs as well. So just coming on to the drainage constraints, really. So through both understanding consultee positions, but also engaging with the applicant and their project team, we have looked at what drainage capacity there could be to attenuate foul on site. As you can see here, really, this is a plan that shows some of the mains drainage in Droxford, but primarily it's all private with septic tanks in the rear gardens, for instance, and there's not a mains drainage connection that's readily accessible for this site. I think the other thing in terms of groundwater as well, we must bear in mind that the site is a form of horticultural use where there might have been herbicides, pesticides, etc. And actually a residential scheme that seeks to manage pollution could be potentially seen as a betterment. What we've got is a scheme that has looked at ground conditions, ground level water monitoring, percolation tests, engagement with the EA. This scheme would require an environmental permit. And what we've ended up with is a scheme that we have tried to balance the scale of development versus that technical constraint. And we feel that we've achieved that balance as officers. Coming on to the highways considerations, we did get quite a late Highways Authority holding objection just a day ago, raising a number of concerns. They're summarised in the update sheet on the front page. So what are Highways concerned about? Well, firstly, in principle, they're happy with the tighter access onto Park Lane. And one of the aspects we did really want to see was a not overly engineered access, bearing in mind some of the characteristics of Droxford I've previously mentioned, and just try and tightening up the access. One way of doing that also is to have this overrun area of granite sets that seeks to try and reduce that visual impression of an unduly engineered access. Highways have been concerned about how a refuse vehicle leaves the site and how that might encroach upon pavements. You can see that here in an earlier tracking diagram where there is a bit of an encroachment here. Actually, what I received, again, quite late in the day, was an updated tracking diagram from the applicants that shows the speed that highways want the tracking to be done at, which is 10 miles an hour. And actually the refuse vehicle fits within those pavements now. So we do feel that element has been addressed, albeit we don't have that final highways confirmation. The other thing they were concerned about was intervisibility between vehicles leaving and oncoming vehicles as well. As we saw, Park Lane is quite narrow. But actually, I think what the tracking and the visibility displays show is that actually there is reasonably good intervisibility along the road, and also it's quite straight. So I think cars could readily see each other in different directions. And the visibility displays that highways want are achievable, and they're drawn on the plans. The other thing highways were concerned about was cars leaving the site and effectively cutting the give-way lines. And again, I think there's a balance there between, do we want a big engineered highways access, or do you follow the more sort of irregular arrangements, if you like, that you do see in Droxford, and have that balance between creating a good street scene. bearing in mind Park Lane is straight, it's quite narrow where, although it has a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, in reality, having myself visited about 4 times, I don't think that's really realistic to get up to that speed. They were also concerned about large estate cars was one of the issues, turning into the site, so looking at the opposite direction and whether they encroach over the give-way lines. Actually, I think what the tracking diagrams have shown is vehicles not using the overrun that well. So I think actually cars turning in do have the ability to use that area as well. And in that respect, I think the tracking could arguably show that that's a much safer approach for them. So overall, I do feel that the highways have raised a number of concerns that I think are in some ways don't take into effect the character and design aspects, and of course Roads in the South Downs really advocates that, and that is something that Hampshire Highways signed up to, as well as some of the technical tracking that has been very recently shown to us actually shows that it is feasible for vehicles to readily enter and exit the site and have good intervisibility. And then lastly, there was some concern about the pedestrian crossing and tactile paving. As you can see here, I mean, the crossing avoids the overrun and is at the shortest distance and tries to keep the desire line along the pavement. Highways were concerned about, well, with the overrun and the tactile paving, are you left with curbing here that might impact on people who are partially sighted, let's say. But actually this tactile paving would be graded down to create flush curbing, or it would go flush with the road level, in which case I don't really see that as an issue. But of course, that's some further technical conversations that we might have with the applicants should consent be granted, and we'll be looking at the finer details. Coming on to the architecture itself, so you can see it's a traditional approach with a good mix of materials, but also a good rationale of using brick. The employment of materials, whether it's slate or tile, roofs and tile hanging at the upper floors, some of that has been taken from what we see in the eclectic mix within Droxford itself. And then these are some of the other units in the scheme, and also around those plans are just some of the photographs of contextual analysis, really. I am getting there, but I think in terms of proposed sections, you can see the top one is the Park Lane frontage that works with the slope, but also you can see the access here. And then secondly, this is the street scene proposed through the scheme, so left to right through here. And what we have sought to do is some varied roof heights, various setbacks, slight differently orientations between properties, just to avoid some regimentation, have different typologies, and try and instill that sort of eclectic character that you do see in Droxford. So going to the main principal considerations, we've looked at the allocation policy, SD65, and the criteria are addressed in the report, and overall officers consider that policy is complied with. We've touched upon housing land supply position. In terms of scale and design, it's the scale is appropriate versus the technical drainage constraints. We think there's a good balance between the number and mix of dwellings in that respect. We do feel that the scheme now instills a characteristic development, both in terms of layout and architecture. We've got an appropriate drainage scheme that addresses what it needs to, but also the source protection zone, which the site is within. And also we do feel that there is sufficient highway safety, notwithstanding the Highways Authority's latest response. And finally, affordable housing, the outcome of the viability appraisal, we have been able to secure on-site delivery with discount market sales. All of that leads on to the recommendation, which is that planning permission be granted, subject to completion of a section 106 for those bullet-pointed items there, as well as conditions in paragraph 9.2 of the report and the update sheet. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Sorry. So the only change to the recommendation is that we're now 6 affordable housing units instead of 7.
That's correct, and that's on the update sheet as well.
Okay, thank you. Right. So we have some public speakers now. The first one is Councillor Danny Lee, who is speaking in a personal capacity, and he's against the application.
Sorry, I'm also speaking as a Central Meon Valley councillor on behalf of my residents and in my own capacity. Apologies if that didn't come across. Shall I start?
Yes, do.
Thank you. Good morning, committee. As a Central Meon Valley councillor, I'm representing concerned residents, including myself as a Droxford resident. I support the objection of Droxford Parish Council. Redevelopment of this long blighted site for much-needed housing in the South Downs National Park is welcomed. However, significant unresolved concerns remain, and I do not believe the application should proceed in its current form. The scheme is overly dense and unurbanised for the sensitive edge of settlement location. The environmental impact exceeds the ecological capacity of the site, and 13-dwelling scheme is almost double the previous pre-application scheme, and is therefore very harmful. Biodiversity gain is substantially below 10% habitat gain, and the Ecosystem Services Statement has a dubious assessment, which is frankly overall negative, not positive. Local nature enhancement opportunities, recently identified by the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Trust, are not mentioned, which could be pursued with the parish council and local landowners. If nature recovery cannot be achieved fully on site, then it should be secured locally for the benefits of Droxford-affected residents, wildlife and the park. Road safety is already a major local concern. This proposal would add additional traffic onto narrow village lanes with poor visibility and existing peak time congestion, especially around the school. With little or no public transport, families are heavily car dependent. Too many additional dwellings heightens the traffic safety risk for residents, pedestrians and school children, including the ground users. The situation will be exacerbated by the inevitable overspill parking. A full road safety audit is much needed. Residents have seen several changes to layouts, orientation, window positions and amenity impacts. I ask the committee to be clear as to exactly what has been approved and to be satisfied that it protects neighbouring amenity and respects the character of the village. Groundwater and drainage risks in the Meon Valley are serious and are well known. This site sits in an area affected by septic tank systems, groundwater sensitivity and flooding concerns. There remains disagreement over the status and vulnerability of the historic well at Court House, where assumptions appear to have been made rather than based on fact. These are not minor technical matters. A comprehensive hydrogeological assessment of local sewerage treatment systems and groundwater risk should be completed before permission is granted and not deferred to later permitting process. I welcome the full Japanese knotweed eradication and verification plan before development starts. However, previous containment efforts have failed, with spread onto neighbouring land causing stress to residents, and this continues as I speak. Independent oversight, public transparency and post-treatment certification is essential. For these reasons, I ask the committee to consider whether this proposal in its current form, with missing facts, incomplete assumptions and assessments, is appropriate without further modification and clarification of the issues raised. To do otherwise creates unacceptable risks to the purpose of the South Downs, protection of the current and future Droxford residents and the park. And thank you.
I'm sorry, you've run out of time. Thank you very much. Our next public speaker is Colin Matheson, who is representing Droxford Parish Council.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Droxford Parish Council maintains its objection to this application. We recognise that this is an allocated site and that redevelopment of this long derelict nursery is desirable in principle. However, allocation does not remove the requirement for development to be appropriate, policy compliant and proportionate to the constraints of the site. Our principal concern remains the proposed increase from 9 to 13 dwellings. represents overdevelopment of a highly constrained site. The officer's report repeatedly acknowledges that foul drainage is the defining limitation. The application relies on a packaged treatment plant and substantial drainage field because there is no main sewer connection. Yet despite identifying drainage as the critical constraint, the recommendation is still to intensify the scheme beyond the level identified within the emerging local plan. The site lies within a groundwater source protection zone and in close proximity to the River Mearn. While consultees have not objected outright, the Parish Council does not believe sufficient certainty has been demonstrated regarding the long-term environmental risks associated with increasing the scale of development on this site. In our view, the cumulative impact of additional dwellings on drainage infrastructure, groundwater protection, and future maintenance obligations has not been adequately resolved. The increase in density inevitably places greater pressure on parking, circulation, amenity, and planning. The report accepts that visitor parking provision is minimal and relies heavily on optimistic assumptions regarding garage use and informal parking arrangements. Members will be aware of the existing constraints on Park Lane, that is not quite narrow, it's single track, particularly near the school, recreation ground and public rights of way. The Parish Council remains concerned that overspill parking and increased congestion will create additional highway and pedestrian safety issues. We are also disappointed that important matters continue to be deferred to conditions, including detailed drainage arrangements, long-term maintenance responsibilities, and the treatment of Japanese knotweed. We welcome the inclusion of affordable housing, but question whether pressure to increase unit numbers has resulted in a scheme that exceeds the environmental and physical capacity of the site. For those reasons, Droxford Parish Council respectfully requests that the application be refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have speakers in support of this application. The first one is Miles Leslie, the applicant.
Good morning, Chair and members.
Morning.
Thank you for your time this morning to consider our planning application at Downvale Nurseries, Droxford. This land has been under our family ownership in excess of 100 years, and up until the early 90s was used as a plant-growing nursery from where our family used to hold and sell plants. This has not been a speculative acquisition. This is a project subject to planning approval, which we intend to construct ourselves, making a meaningful contribution to SDNP's housing targets in a market which continues to be rather turbulent. Following on from the allocation of the land in 2017, we have experienced a number of hurdles, but we are keen to ensure that the site contributes positively to Droxford and resolves a major issue for the village, which is the removal of the Japanese knotweed. Should you be minded to support the officer recommendation here this morning, we as a family intend to allocate the necessary funds to fully remediate the site in the very short term, and Condition 13 puts a positive obligation on us to work with the local authority in taking the necessary steps to do so. In relation to the various other technical matters, we have worked closely with our consultants and stakeholders to ensure workable solutions have been found. We have welcomed the positive engagement of the SDNP design team to ensure the proposed dwellings complement the village and mitigate neighbourly matters such as overlooking. Furthermore, it has been refreshing to work with a case officer who has proactively engaged with us along the journey of our application. I would like to thank Mr Ferguson for his efforts, which are clearly reflected in his comprehensive committee report this morning. We have proactively engaged with all residents of the village, and given the site's proximity to Droxford Junior School, have met and spoken with the head teacher. We will work with him and his team and will seek to undertake disruptive works where possible in holiday periods. In this regard, our planning application is supported by a construction management plan. Our family welcomes the potential prospects of bringing our former nursery site, which historically has provided local jobs and produce to the village, into a development that integrates seamlessly and provides a mixture of homes for local people. In relation to the groundwater concern raised by Councillor Lee, my father, aunt, grandmother, great-uncles owned all of the property from the police station to the chapel. The cesspit was in fact installed by my father and great-uncle some 60 years ago, and therefore not an assertion but a fact. I hope you agree that the plans before you this morning are worthy of approval. Our team has worked tirelessly to deliver a sensitively designed scheme that is policy compliant and has embraced SDNP's landscape-led approach to development in the National Park. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And our second speaker in support of this application is Rosalind Graham, the agent.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. My name is Rosalind Graham of Solve Planning, speaking on behalf of the applicant. You've already heard a thorough presentation from the officer who has explained the merits of the scheme and how it accords with planning policy, and the applicants have explained how they have worked collaboratively with officers. So I will focus on key matters relevant to your decision today. Firstly, on paper, this site benefits from an allocation for a higher number of homes. In reality, this is a starting assumption made without the benefit of detailed technical analysis, particularly in relation to drainage. This site is therefore far from typical and has effectively established its own clear development limits. As the principal constraint here is drainage, all drainage infrastructure must be contained within the site, and its capacity is directly linked to occupancy levels. Put simply, more homes mean more people, and more people require larger drainage fields, reducing the land available for development. This creates a clear and unavoidable limit to intensification. The drainage strategy as part of this scheme, however, is based on a full, detailed, accurate technical assessment, which has been accepted by the Environment Agency, will not adversely affect groundwater, and it is designed to work with the number of occupants for the scheme. Appropriate SUDS measures are also incorporated. The design process has therefore been about achieving the right balance, how to optimise the site while respecting its limits, reflecting village character, delivering a meaningful housing mix, and meeting policy requirements. The scheme has evolved positively through officer feedback, members' observations from the site visit, and engagement with local residents, and this has resulted in a stronger layout, an improved housing mix with more smaller homes to meet local need, and a policy-compliant level of affordable housing. Although dwelling numbers have increased during the process, the proposal now represents the maximum the site can accommodate without exceeding drainage capacity. In respect of the revised allocation, this was based on a notional figure derived from the applicant, and it was also based on larger dwellings. As noted in comments from the highways recently, it's important to note that both the site's former use and the original allocation would generate higher vehicle movements than the scheme before you today, which has been designed to avoid adverse highway safety impacts. It would also be reasonable for a condition to be added to include further details of the design of that access to be provided at a later stage. In conclusion, the scheme before you is one that is the result of detailed technical work, meaningful engagement and thoughtful revision. It is a scheme that is both responsible and realistic. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes our public speakers. So now, members, it's up to you. But before we do that, I just need to comment on the fact that Tom will not be able to be involved in the debate or the vote because of your late arrival. So everybody else. John.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just pick up the point, Richard, on highways? And the last speaker there just said that we should have a condition which related to additional highway safety work or design, as it were, to make sure we were comfortable. At the moment, I have to say I'm not comfortable with what I see, so perhaps in that context you could tell us.
Richard, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, John. I think it could be reasonable to condition some further design work. So if I use it as an example with the tactile paving and pedestrian crossing and highways raising concern about the typical upstands or curbing, we could look at that in further detail to ensure flush surfaces, for instance, and appropriately graded pedestrian crossing. That's as an example. Secondly, we could have members could consider a condition for a road safety audit, a stage 1 road safety audit, and if that's not acceptable, then clearly we wouldn't be discharging that condition. So it would be incumbent upon the applicants to provide that further detail. What I would say is that with some of the additional tracking diagrams that really we've only just received, and clearly the Highways Authority can't respond to those at the moment, or haven't had the ability to respond to those. Nevertheless, from our own interpretation of tracking, etc., I think a reasonably, good safe access can be provided whilst balanced with design considerations around road in the South Downs and having a good, appropriate street scene. But sorry, I think to go directly to your question, yes, there could realistically be questions on further detailed design work for the access. And secondly, we could require a road safety audit to give that additional layer of consideration.
Thank you, Richard. John?
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. I think we should add those as conditions, actually. I think it's very important. We do have a school. The children are from 7 to 11, and they clearly come out of that school and go to the school, to the main road. So it's actually very important that we have a proper audit, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew?
Yes, it's really a point of clarification, Robin. It's the fact that we are shown the refuse vehicle tracking coming in and out of the village. It doesn't show vehicle tracking going in the other direction, and I believe there are properties, or they could in the future be properties, built to the other side of the site. Why isn't there vehicle tracking out of the site and into the site in both directions?
Richard?
Thank you, Chairman. We do have additional tracking diagrams. I've picked out this one in particular because it does cover the refuse vehicle. Also, I would just highlight on this tracking plan is it actually tracks the largest, what's called the supersize refuse vehicle, which is 11.2 metres long. Now, that's a worst case scenario. Now, Park Lane, Police Station Lane or Union Lane, are actually quite narrow, and I would be surprised if a supersize bin lorry was being used, and actually the smaller one of around 7 metres is probably more appropriate for those roads. Clearly, we don't have a consultation response that explicitly considers that, but from my experience, the supersize tracking is presenting a worst-case scenario.
Okay, thank you. Andrew wants to come back.
Well, if only to say that I was actually, in my question, I was going to suggest that the refuse vehicle would have to go the other way up the road as well. So in other words, you've got the pavements which take allowance for that vehicle, but you'd also have to take pavements would have to take allowance for a smaller vehicle. In other words, it appears that as far as we're concerned and as far as we can see, there isn't the evidence there that they can cater for a vehicle which might be used on site.
So that would need to be part of the further considerations that we're already talking about. Gary?
I think, Madam Chairman, I'm quite uncomfortable with this, to be perfectly honest. The actual houses look fantastic and the layout looks good. It's the tracking. I've just I was scrutinising the in and out, and just looking at it, could we put the tracking back up again, please? Because I think it's crucial.
Do we have a minor technical problem here?
Use a hammer, that normally works.
Or even a major one. There we are.
Ah, there we are. We're back in life again. Yeah. There's a lot of assumptions in this, and you're talking about potentially the narrowness of the road, and unfortunately I didn't do the site visit. They're hoping that when the refuse lorry comes down that road, they're not going to meet anybody trying to come out of the site. Because you've got, and being in the local authority and being in charge of the portfolio holder for refuse and all this lot, you're assuming that the local authority will not use supersize freighters. If they're coming into the villages and it's in Winchester district, I'm sure got a long way to go, and a small freighter will fill up. So it will most likely be a big freighter coming out to all these villages. And I think with the holding objection, too much is being assumed that we can sort this out on a condition. I think personally, and I'll try and garner some support on this, that until highways are absolutely okay with it, and I propose that we should just defer it until such times as highways say yay or nay, because I just don't think we can get a freighter down there and a car coming out on that side of the road, because if I had my car there and a big freighter was coming down, there'd be a lot of reversing from me.
Okay. let's just park that until we've had the debate, and then we will come back to it. I think Alan was next.
I'm afraid I disagree with the general tenor of the comments which the majority of my colleagues who've spoken so far have themselves spoken. It seems Droxford is a very pleasant, medium-sized village. I go there from time to time for reasons unrelated to planning site visits and so forth. So I'm modestly familiar with it. But as well as having gone on a site visit, it seems, well, first of all, this is an allocated site. The applicants have clearly had a go at designing the proposal in a way that is sympathetic to the nature of Droxford. We always get comments when previously vacant in terms of housing development sites in villages get developed that, oh, it looks too dense. But we all know, at least those of us who've thought about the nature of villages and the way houses fit into them, that often many of the most attractive traditional bits of villages are actually quite high density, where the cottages are close to each other. To be honest, I was slightly disappointed that a site this size could only get 13 houses on it, but I understand the interrelationship with that, with the drainage issue and so forth. So all that makes sense. I wasn't very impressed by the holding objection from Hampshire County Council on the highways issue, which my colleagues are getting concerned about. I agree with John Hyland's suggestion of the condition about the road safety audit and so forth, because that just shows us taking a careful and, as it were, considerate approach to the matter. But it seems to me that what is being proposed on the face of it and subject to that audit is taking a sensible approach which acknowledges the fact that this is in a village setting. I thought we'd moved away from all this sort of heavy engineering to deal with the lowest probability interaction of vehicles in villages, that you have to have everything heavily engineered so that two significant sized vehicles can. We've got past that. It's horrible, the result it produces when that sort of approach is adopted in villages. I thought Richard Ferguson dealt very sensibly with the holding objection from Hampshire, and as long as we do what John Hyland suggested in relation to the safety audit, because obviously it is a matter one needs to take proper account of the comings and goings relating to the school and so forth. But really, this is a sensible design that actually has been reasonably thoughtfully done and will fit in my opinion, once it's all settled down, quite well into the overall character and appearance of Droxford. It's exactly the sort of thing we want, and it's an allocated site. So I am going to vote, subject to that additional condition, in favour of the grant of permission as recommended.
Thank you. Daniel.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I agree with Alan very much in respect of his comments in terms of the scheme in general, but I have to say I'm not quite as relaxed about the highways aspects of it. I'm concerned in part about the principle of rejecting or overriding an objection by the Highways Authority, particularly in respect of a site that's so close to a primary school, as previously been pointed out. I can't help feeling that either legally or in the court of public opinion, we might be considered liable should we approve the scheme and then something happen later, a child being run over or whatever, that people would be quick to point fingers at us. So in terms of process, are we able to include something now that would get to a point where we were happy that after a road safety audit, you get to a point where highways would actually remove their objection? So we'd formally remove that barrier.
Good question. Tim?
Thank you. I think certainly the imposition of the conditions would do much to allay some of the discussion you've had and the fears. It could be constructed in such a way that unless there was formal sign-off from highways, no permission would be forthcoming. I think I'd urge a bit of caution on that, and of course it could be to be delegated in consultation with the chair, because as one of you have said already, there are a number of occasions where you have thought it appropriate to not go quite with Highways advice because of other considerations, and that is within your gift. And I can think of some award-winning schemes where you've done that. So my suggestion would be that whilst it's for consideration and for you to determine, going that far is possibly too far. Clearly, that's your decision as to how we phrase the condition. So if you move to going for a permission subject to these 2 extra conditions, we might need to be very clear as to how far you're framing one of the conditions in terms of the road safety audit and what happens.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
I say here very much to Alan Aylesbury, sitting next to me. I agree with everything he says. I think this is an admirable scheme, the way it's been developed and come forward.
Paul, could you speak up a bit? I suspect the people at the back of the room can't hear you. Move your mic a bit closer.
It's an admirable scheme, in my view. It almost seems to me we're looking for, just searching for reservations. I mean, having visited the site, this is a lane that it's impossible to go very fast on, past this site. And the idea of engineering an entrance to will look like a suburban estate is, in design terms, would offend, I think. I think the proposal is fine. The conditions that John Hyland has proposed are sensible. And obviously, once the thing has passed the road safety audit, I think we're clear of any fears that we might be held responsible. The prospect of speeding traffic and HGVs meeting each other, I think, are very, very slim indeed.
Thank you, Paul. Robert?
I don't disagree with what Paul and Alan said. However, I've got a very separate issue. Having read the papers last week, I thought this looked an admirable scheme, looked quite straightforward, and we fully supportive. We had an objection overnight, effectively, from one of the main consultees. We're a decision-making body. We don't have the information on which to make a decision. How on earth can we justify we've got to wait for a road safety audit today, but 2 days ago we didn't have to wait for one? I just think it's outrageous that we're not deferring this until we've actually got the information on which we make a decision. We are the planning committee. We shouldn't be conditioning everything. We should have a look at the information we've got and then make a decision on what's in front of us. And I don't think we can today. So I fundamentally think that objection overnight should defer this information until we have that. I don't like conditions. We've talked continually on this committee about conditions don't solve problems. Problems are solved by actually having what's in front of us that we then approve. I just think that when we got a holding objection from the Highways Authority on safety grounds next to a school, I don't see how we can't defer it until we actually get the outcome of that and actually feel comfortable with what we're actually deciding. So I would absolutely suggest we defer this till we have that road safety audit, and then it's a very quick decision. I have no issue. I was expecting this to be a short discussion. I'd like to have that bit of paper in front of me and to read it before I make a decision. So I'm going to propose that we defer this until we have that information.
Thank you. It's very unhelpful that Highways have come in so late with this. I think that's a point that we may need to make to Highways. Absolutely. Apart from that. John?
So on a slightly different subject, I was going to agree with Alan and Paul across there about the scheme and the layout and the design of the scheme, which I'm very comfortable with, and I think it actually fits very well with the areas in and around Droxford. That's aside from my proposal earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. No more comments? Daniel?
Sorry, thank you for forbearance, Madam Chairman, for allowing me to come back a second time. But if I got the points of the compass correct, the very large garden for the bottom left-hand house is going to be dark, given the height of the hedges / trees. Are they? And therefore, if I were buying it, I would probably want to cut them down. But I presume, I would hope there's protection to stop the future owners doing any such thing. Is there limitations on what they can do with regard to the adjoining trees?
Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. So on that, the property at that end does have the largest and most extensive rear garden, and there was a deliberate attempt to actually bring that unit forward, not only because of creating smaller gardens, like I said, with the character of Droxford, but also being aware of those large conifers. There are no TPOs on site, and to be honest, I can't quite recall if they're within the site or just outside. I just need to double check the topographical survey. But either way, that's a very good usable garden space for that size of unit.
Thank you. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I think this site does lend itself well to development, and indeed it's an allocated site, and there's good reason for that. I also think the officers have done a very good job in creating a very balanced and positive design. There are, however, concerns, and we've heard those. I mean, I'm in an odd position where I'm agreeing with absolutely everybody, despite the opposing views, which is, I'm clearly in a very reasonable, accommodating mood this morning. I am, though, coming down on the side of the comments by Robert regarding safety. And I will just pick up an additional question regarding vehicle and tracking that hasn't been raised so far. And sitting behind all of my thoughts are the previous use when it was a nursery and the vehicle movements associated with that, the so historic movements compared with proposed movements. I'm not sure we've got figures on that, but that's just something in my mind that may well level things out somewhat. It was raised that a refuse vehicle now fits along the road. It fits within the pavements. Now, does that also allow a vehicle to exit, should they wish to do so, whilst that refuse vehicle is fitting between those pavements? Because I think that could be a significant source of concern. I mean, this really is going down the rabbit hole of worst case scenario catastrophism, but a refuse vehicle at the same time as an emergency vehicle is required. What if maybe could be, it's a possibility in it, but it's a low in my mind. So there's that question specifically. I would also like to raise the point around water impacts raised by the speakers, and I completely agree, actually. Impact assessments prior to development are, in my view, a way to go, although I am reasonably comfortable with the conditions on the update sheet that have been provided by officers, so I'll leave that one there. Regarding the Japanese knotweed, now Japanese knotweed can take up to 5 years to eradicate. So are we suggesting there's a phased approach to this development where that corner of the site is left till last with segregation that is actually needing to be a dynamic separation buffer zone? Because although you can get rid of about 90% of Japanese knotweed within the first 2 years, the shoots that come up in the subsequent 3 to 4 years after that can move by up to about 7 meters. So you need a considerable buffer distance when you're dealing with Japanese knotweed. So I think a phased approach would be sensible. But these are comments subject to the proposal to defer, which has been raised. So I think, well, maybe answers to those questions and then that proposal or the other way around. I'm flexible. Thank you, Chair.
Richard, do you have some, I'll just come to you in a second, Gary. Do you have some comments about the Japanese knotweed?
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just answer Daniel's specific question about those trees. With one of my backup slides, this is the arboricultural survey of the site, and those large conifers are just outside of the site. So you can see the black dots, they're trunks, and they're just outside. Okay. In terms of the Japanese knotweed, Condition 13 seeks to secure a scheme, and it's open to us in terms of, well, actually what level of detail and requirement that might entail.
Can you point out on there where the Japanese knotweed is, please?
Just trying to get the pointer, bear with me. Can you see that? There we are. It's in the north top right corner, primarily.
Okay. Under that house?
Yes, there is. There's quite a large area of it up here.
So we've been asked about phasing the development so that that Japanese knotweed can be properly eradicated prior to completion. So does the condition cover that properly?
I mean, in terms of phasing, you know, we typically see phasing with much larger schemes. This is a 13 dwelling scheme. There could be a stepped approach within the scheme that we could look to secure within condition 13, taking on board members' feedback and concerns about that. That is something we could take away to consider in the discharge of the condition.
Okay. Sorry? Yes, go ahead.
Chair, we could just, on condition 13, it's a narrowish point, but we could just add the words including phasing when it talks about eradicating Japanese knotweed, so it's very clear what the necessary steps would be. And forgive me, just while I've got the speaker, and I know Rob's keen to come in, but there seems to be two concerns in these highways matters. One is around the refuse vehicles and one is around the road safety audit. I think the road safety audit we get, and it'll be a decision for yourselves whether you think that can be left to ourselves and highways or whether the whole scheme should be deferred. On the bins thing, I think, and I'm trying not to be personal here and reflect, but you know, we all travel around in these villages and you're often behind a truck, there's often a parked car and you manoeuvre around, you wait for a minute or two. And that's very, very common. That's part of village life. And I'd be urging caution as to how much weight you put on in terms of potential conflict between refuse vehicles that may or may not happen, and the weight that would have actually in the broader scheme of things, and whether that were to be challenged. That's all.
Thank you. Gary.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Thanks for letting me come back. I personally would be uncomfortable and I will not be voting for this unless we defer it, personally. It's not just the refuse vehicles. You know, when those houses are initially going to be occupied, you're going to have removals lorries, you're going to have Sainsbury's, Ocado, and God knows what else coming in and out of that site. And as Robert quite right said, the school's next door to it, and you've got children. The road is not wide. I've been looking at on Ordnance Survey just how narrow it actually is, and I can't possibly accept it being conditioned. If the road safety audit is handed to highways and highways say no, where does that leave us? Does the whole site then just go? I prefer to have the road safety audit done, handed to highways. If highways are sufficiently satisfied it's okay, personally I would vote for it in the next meeting if it came to that. Because I think the layout is really nice, the housing is really nice, it's not overdense, it's just road safety. And as Robert quite rightly said, I won't be comfortable if something happens because of it.
Thank you. Rob.
Yes, obviously a lot of discussion about this. First of all, as officers, late responses are always regrettable, and it's not easy when we get late responses to consultations. I would say, however, that you know, in some cases we might get a late response that might be an objection, which causes us to say to members, actually, members, we suggest deferral because actually this has come in at a late stage and it does raise a significant issue. I would say in this respect, though, that Richard has talked through why we have come to the conclusion that as officers we believe that we can move forward and that we believe that the objection is able to be overcome either, by the way, through conditions or in relation to the objections that they've raised. What I would also say is that we talk about conditions, and I think it's something which I constantly say to my officers is it absolutely necessary that we need this condition or we need that conditions? But also there is the other flip side of the coin, that we are told that if there is development which would otherwise be unacceptable but can be addressed through a condition, we should impose a condition. And in this respect, we believe that with the advice that Richard has given this morning, and together with the suggestion of a condition, the other conditions, that development can be acceptable, and that's why we've reached that conclusion. But obviously, members, you have to weigh that up, whether you are convinced of that and whether you believe that you need for it to be deferred. But I just wanted to explain the reasoning that brought us to that conclusion.
Thank you. Right, well, we've had a few suggestions. We do have a proposal in front of us, I believe. Robert, would you like to repeat your proposal?
I would like to propose we defer this until we have the full evidence on a road safety audit and the overcoming of the Hampshire Highways objection in front of us.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, Gary? Thank you very much. We need a vote for that proposal, please. May I see a show of hands to support that proposal? And against? And deferred?
And abstained, you mean?
Oh, sorry. Abstained. Do we have an abstention? Andrew? Yes. Thank you.
So that's carried.
So that's carried. So that application is deferred until such time as we have information from Highways. Thank you very much, everybody. So we'll move now on to agenda item 7. And this is this Philippa? Philippa, are you ready to deliver the report to us? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. This application seeks permission for the demolition of a large existing mixed-use sui generis building owned and most recently used by Sussex Police and the construction of 27 residential dwellings and associated works. I'll draw your attention to the update sheet, which mainly relates to minor amendments to conditions due to ongoing discussions with the applicant. The more important update is to the recommendation, which reflects a recent request from the applicant to, in the event of a grant of planning permission, for them to utilise a phasing plan which would enable SIL payments to be staggered. It doesn't change the essence of the conditions if we needed to change them. It's just so that they could stagger the development in order for their SIL payments. I've got a verbal update. So, since the publication of the update sheet, we've received an email from a trustee of the Friends of Lewis. The email queries what the views of the design review panel are in respect of the proposal and questions how officers feel the design would contribute positively to the setting of the conservation area and ask for the consultation response that relates to this assessment. They also note that the design officer concludes that they have concerns. In responding, officers confirmed that the application was not considered by the design review panel. The planning inspector had provided a very clear steer on unacceptable elements of the previous scheme, which has assisted officers and specialists in the consideration of the current scheme. In addition, as always, whilst there remain some concerns by consultees, case officers must consider all comments and form a view as to how much weight can be afforded in the consideration of the application. Also, and thank you to Daniel for highlighting this to me, but there is a small error on the update sheet for condition 25 where there is a double negative. So there is an erroneous not in there. So that needs to be removed. So it says, no part of the development shall be occupied. So just to be clear, otherwise we tie ourselves in knots. I'll now move on to the presentation with a warning that there's quite a lot to cover for this site. So, the application site is located in a prominent position on a major road junction. It's sandwiched to the east of Neville Road, to the south of Spittal Road, to the north of Spittal Road and the south of De Montfort Road within the settlement of Lewis. It's predominantly residential with HMP Lewis to the west. The site is surrounded by Lewis Conservation Area but is not within it. The site has 2 existing vehicular accesses from Spittal Road, and the building has been vacant for some time and is now in a state of disrepair. The site is allocated for development in the Lewis Neighbourhood Plan under Policy PL1B. The policy anticipates 25 units on this site. So here's the aerial photograph. Here you can see the extent of built form that surrounds the site. You can also observe the 2 hornbeam trees at the western end of the site, which are subject to tree protection orders, and I'll come on to those more later. In terms of the heritage assets, this site shows the extent of the conservation area, which largely surrounds the building. The light green dots are the closest listed buildings, so they're some distance away, and the darker green spots show protected trees, including the 2 on the site. So turning to some site photographs, it's a very, very soggy day, so apologies. Photograph A is looking towards the site from Neville Road, so the site is here. Photograph 2 is looking, again, similar view, but from another angle, looking towards the site, and C here is looking at the western end of the site. These are the hornbeam trees here. The next photograph, D, is one of the existing accesses from Spittal Road, which is adjacent to this property, which is 117 Western Road. Photograph E is looking at the eastern end of the site from Spittal Road, and F is looking towards the western end from Spittal Road. So a few more photographs. This is the western end of the building from De Montfort Road, and this is looking up towards the western end. The trees are right down the end there. And again, this is the eastern end of the site from De Montfort Road. And just a few more photos of just wider context. So this is looking at the flank elevation of 117 Western Road, which I'll come back to later. Here is the junction of Spittal Road and Western Road, which leads down into the centre of Lewis. And this photograph is just a better view of the trees, the highly constrained trees that would be removed as part of this proposal. So a key thing for us to consider for this application is that you'll be aware from the planning history that there were 2 appeals which were dismissed in 2022. In dismissing the appeals, the inspector reached a number of conclusions which are material considerations for the determination today. Not only what was considered unacceptable, but as importantly, what was considered acceptable. So trying to be brief here, the inspector's main concerns were the impact of the scale, bulk and mass and design of the building in terms of the character and appearance of the area, including the loss of all of the trees, harm to the conservation area in its setting, the tile-hung wall of number 117 Western Road being obscured, loss of privacy to barn stables and 93, 95 and 97 De Montfort Road, cramped amenity space provided, oh, that's meant to say poor accommodation, offered by the dwellings, apologies, and an inappropriate housing mix. But the things that the inspector did consider acceptable was the viability position, the low number of car parking spaces, the highway and pedestrian safety aspects of the scheme, the sustainable construction and the drainage matters. So we'll come on to that in more detail. Just as a quick reminder, these were the previous decisions. Obviously, this is a very brief amount of information on the previous schemes, but just gives a bit of an idea. So Appeal A, 4 stories, right on the western end of the site. The trees, the 2 hornbeam trees would be here, but they were removed as part of that scheme. And you can see this is the terrace area that was considered to be unacceptable from a residential amenity point of view. And then these tall dwellings as you move down Spittal Road. And Appeal B was slightly lower, but that's a very similar sort of design. And the inspector considered both of these to be unacceptable. So, turning to the current scheme. So, the application proposes the erection of 27 dwellings in the form of 17 houses and 10 apartments. Car and cycle parking is provided at the western end of the site here, beneath the apartments above. Vehicular access is shown by the red arrow here from Spittal Road, and the green arrows show the area that the refuse and recycling would be collected from. Pedestrian access is shown with blue arrows. So 2 Twittons are proposed through the site to improve permeability here and here. And pedestrian access through to the car parking is there, and then access through to the cycle parking is here. Where am I? Yeah, and the 2 hornbeam trees would be retained, and a smaller willow tree that's in the middle, but I'll come on to those in a bit more detail. Turning to some street scenes, the top one is the Spittal Road elevation, and it shows the apartment block here with the car parking podium beneath it. The vehicular access would be through here. The houses then step down as you move along Spittal Road. From the western elevation, you can see the key difference between the proposal and previous schemes, with a clear gap between the blocks of development, letting light through. I've included these 2 images so you can sort of compare. That's the existing situation on a sunnier day, and this is on the soggy day. But you can see how that would look in comparison. A few more street scenes here. So this is the De Montfort Road elevation, and it shows the stepping down of development from the apartments as you move down the road. The eastern elevation shows the gap between the blocks of built form, and you can see how the roof levels would drop as you move along. These are the internal street scenes. So obviously if you're stood within the site, you have development on either side of you. So these just show the internal elevations, and you notice the parking podium beneath the apartment blocks there. So in a bit more detail, here's a closer look at the apartments, and I'll come on to the materials in detail shortly. But here you can see the proposed car parking vents which provide light and ventilation to the parking. In terms of the dwellings, you can see the 2 proposed Twittons. So there's one reasonably central to the site, and then one alongside 117 Western Road, which improves permeability through the site. And you can see views to the proposed tulip tree, which would be central to the development. I appreciate this is quite small, but this is an idea of the floor plan. So on the ground floor, you obviously have the car parking and cycle parking beneath the apartments, as well as refuse, cycling and storage for the apartments. And here you can see the amenity spaces for the dwellings, but we'll come on to that a bit more later. At first floor, you can see the proposed podium level amenity space for the apartments. At second floor, 12 of the 17 houses have accommodation in the roof space. And yeah, so these ones here. And at third floor, there's only a small area of accommodation on Spittal Road, but none on De Montfort Road. In terms of parking and cycle parking, so 68 cycle spaces would be provided, which equates to a cycle space per bedroom. The cycle parking is all located within the ground floor of the apartment block. 17 parking spaces would be provided, which is 1 per house. So no parking is proposed for the apartments, and I'll come on to that a bit more later. Refuse and recycling storage is provided for the apartments in here and for the dwellings further along here. Large bins would be collected from the storage areas and brought to the curb for collection. So a bit of information on materials. The apartments would be constructed in red brick tile hanging and red clay tiled roofs. During the course of the application, additional brick detailing has been incorporated into the design, which is welcome. There are brick bond stacks, projecting brick details, and brick corbelling features incorporated. Just giving you a quick look there. In terms of the dwellings would be constructed in red brick and varied colour render with slate roof tiles. A number of dwellings have roof lights or dormer windows. And I've included a couple of pictures of dwellings on De Montfort Road and Western Road, just to show that the applicant has sought to really use the character of the dwellings that are close to the site. In terms of openings, the apartments would feature aluminium or timber casement windows and zinc-clad pitched roof dormer windows. The car park ventilation would include these currently sage green metal grills, which also provide an opportunity for local art installations, but that would be secured via condition. The entrance gates would also be metal set back from the highway here. And for the houses, they would include casement windows in timber or aluminium and zinc-clad dormers. And there would be 2 different types of timber composite doors. So in terms of amenity spaces, the apartments would benefit from a shared amenity space above the car park here. And the houses would each have an area of semi-private amenity space in the form of a small terrace, which leads to a communal garden in the middle. In terms of trees and landscaping, unlike the previous dismissed appeal, the current scheme would retain the 2 hornbeam trees, which are now protected, and a smaller willow tree. The scheme would require the removal of 5 highly constrained trees in the northeastern corner of the site up here. This obviously enables the development, and it also enables pedestrian connectivity because a area of pavement is included along here where there isn't one currently. It's recognised that it would be more beneficial to the site, to the trees, if the apartments were moved further away in order to promote future growth. However, the proposed building would be sited no closer to the trees, and the tree protection measures would be deployed during construction. As such, officers consider this acceptable. And the site really provides an opportunity to introduce planting and landscaping where there is limited options at the moment. So hopefully you can see this clearly. So these are comparative street scenes showing the current building and the previous appeals and what is proposed now. So it's useful in demonstrating the current scheme against the planning history, as it were. The current proposal is set further to the east, enabling the retention of the hornbeam trees. The apartment building would be taller than the existing building, but the rest of the development would be at a lower level. And the key differences are demonstrated on this western elevation. So this blue line is the existing building. The current proposal is obviously what you can see, and the green and red lines are Appeal A and Appeal B as shown. And this is doing the same, but with the eastern elevation and the De Montfort Road elevation. So here you can see it's set further east. And actually, if I just go back, you can see it is set in further than the existing building. Yeah, so hopefully that slide is helpful in that regard. Turning to a couple of visuals. So this is a visual of the development from Neville Road looking along Spittal Road. And this is further along Spittal Road looking towards the junction with Western Road here. Okay, so the main considerations. So the principle of development on this site is acceptable by virtue of its allocation in the Lewis Neighbourhood Plan and its siting within the settlement of Lewis. One of your key considerations is whether the proposal has overcome the previous concerns and conclusions reached by the inspector. As set out in the agenda report, officers are satisfied that the current proposal has addressed these concerns and has not introduced further concerns. So with regard to affordable housing and viability, owing to the site's vacant nature, the applicant is able to claim vacant building credit, which means that a policy SD28, that policy would expect 4.67 affordable units on site unless it can be demonstrated that it's not viable. The applicant's financial viability appraisal contended that the scheme would be not viable if it were to provide that level of affordable units. There's a level of disagreement between their assessment and that's carried out by the authority's assessor. As such, it's proposed that in the event of an approval, the Section 106 agreement would secure a mechanism to carry out further viability assessments with an opportunity to secure additional affordable units depending on the results of the assessment. This mirrors the conclusion reached by the appeal inspector and is a mechanism that the authority is securing in other relevant legal agreements. Notwithstanding this, the applicant is putting forward 2 shared ownership units as part of the proposed development, which would be secured via legal agreement. In terms of heritage and design, the scale, bulk mass and design of the previous schemes was a key concern, as I've set out by the appeal inspector. The authority's design and conservation officers have provided detailed advice during the course of the application, and the applicant has responded by amending the scheme to include greater detail and variation across the scheme. It's recognised that the apartment building in particular constitutes a large structure in a prominent location. The design officer in particular would have liked to have seen this reduced further, However, the introduction of greater articulation and detailing in the elevations has helped to reduce the perceived bulk. So yeah, it's recognised that the authorities specialists would have liked to see further changes. However, officers are satisfied that the proposed development would have an acceptable appearance and would make a positive contribution to the character of the area and the setting of the conservation area. And a number of conditions would secure quality of materials and detail. Sustainable construction, 3 passive house certified homes would be provided as part of the proposed development. The CO2 reduction relative to Part L is 71.9%, which exceeds our SPD. The scheme includes air source heat pumps, water butts, EV charging, and small areas of green roofing. With regard to highways, the proposed development would require and secure a number of local highways works and improvements. It's a material consideration that the appeal inspector found the proposed highway works and parking provision to be acceptable. Pedestrian access would be improved through the introduction of 2 twittons through the site and via the provision of pedestrian pavement on the north side of De Montfort Road. All 17 houses would be provided with a dedicated space within the site. The apartments would not have parking spaces, but residents would be provided with membership to the local car club. The inspector considered that the sustainable location of the site and access to alternative forms of transport in the area supported an under provision of parking, and 68 cycle parking parking spaces would be provided. A number of highways matters and contributions would be secured via the legal agreement as set out. On this basis, officers are satisfied that the proposed development would not result in harm to the local highway network. Residential amenity, the previous scheme included an area of communal roof terrace, which the inspector concluded would result in a loss of privacy to the occupiers of 93, 95 and 97 De Montfort Road and the adjacent barn stables. The current scheme does not include a terrace. It's recognised that any development on this site will alter the relationship that the neighbouring occupiers have with it. However, officers are satisfied that there will be no material harm by way of loss of privacy, overlooking, loss of light or overbearance. It's a predominantly residential area, therefore the introduction of additional residential uses is acceptable. The proposed dwellings are considered to provide a good standard of accommodation. In terms of the amenity space, it's recognised that the provision of semi-private and communal amenity space would not be the choice of all residents, but it's considered to be an acceptable solution for this site and was supported by the authority's design officer. As noted previously, the proposed development would involve the removal of 5 highly constrained trees at the northeastern corner of the site. These enable the development to be carried out and the provision of a pedestrian pavement, which is helpful for pedestrian connectivity. The hornbeam trees at the western end of the site would be retained and protected during construction. The development provides a great opportunity to provide planting and landscaping on the site and enhance the biodiversity. The scheme is not able to achieve 10% on site, although there will be improvements on site, and the rest will be secured via an off-site solution, and there were no concerns raised by the ecologist. In terms of drainage, the site is in flood zone 1, which is the lowest risk of flooding. The site's located within Southern Water's Lewis groundwater abstraction source protection zone, where groundwater is particularly sensitive. The presence of the existing building has made preliminary testing difficult. However, the testing that was carried out did identify elevated concentrations of contaminants. So Southern Water and the Environment Agency have requested a number of conditions which seek for the relevant investigations to be undertaken and the necessary remediation actions to be secured. And conditions 6 to 11 in the report cover that. They didn't raise any objection to the development, however. Surface and foul water will be discharged to Southern Water's foul water sewer. Surface water would be held in attenuation tanks and then discharged at a restricted rate to the sewer. The LLFA and Southern Water consider this to be an acceptable arrangement. And in terms of air quality, the development incorporates a number of measures which would contribute positively towards mitigation. So, the recommendation. The officers are of the view that the proposal delivers on the in-principle neighbourhood plan allocation for residential development. It provides 27 homes with 2 affordable dwellings on a brownfield site in a highly sustainable location within the national park. It's our officers' view that the appeal inspector's concerns have been overcome and the proposal would be in accordance with the development plan. And as set out in the agenda report and on the update sheet, officers are recommending approval subject to the matters set out here. Thank you.
Thank you, Philly. We have one public speaker against this application. That is Barry Paris, who is representing himself.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee.
Good morning.
I live at number 2 Barnstables, which is opposite the apartment blocks. So we do not have any issue with the development in general, apart from the size of the apartments. At that point at the Montford Road is very narrow, and what is proposed is basically a 30-foot brick wall just a few metres away from where we all live. The apartment block is just too large in scale and will lead to loss of light and privacy. Also, the design of the apartment block we don't think is suitable for the area. We also have an issue with the loss of parking. And that's about it, really. Sorry, I'm not very used to public speaking.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. We don't have anybody in support of the application. So, members, it's down to you. John.
Thank you, Chairman. As a scheme generally, actually, I'm very comfortable with it. I do find the elevations a tad boring, but I think that could improve. But it's actually slightly better than the ones that went to appeal. So from that point of view, I'm very comfortable with it. My question relates to the contamination on the site, actually. I mean, it just concerns me that, have we got enough information to actually make a decision on that?
John, Philippa.
Thank you. So I think the difficulty with the site is it's obviously occupied by a really large building that is making preliminary testing difficult. So the applicant has done the testing that they're able to do within the confines of the development that's there. And I think the conditions that have been put forward by the Environment Agency and Southern Water do give us the reassurance that further testing will be carried out in advance of the site being kind of brought forward. So I think we can take assurance from those conditions that have been put to us.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa.
Gary.
Thank you, Chairman. Just 2 questions. Philippa, do you know what the height of the current building is? And could you go back so we can look down at the like a bird's eye view of the site? Is that one there? What are those blue bits? Are they ponds? Because you've got green, I can understand that. And I've got the buildings, I can understand that. But what are those blue bits? Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Bear with me a second. So I think those are the, it's not clearly shown on here, but I think those are the attenuation tanks. So it's just showing where. Yeah, I think that's right.
Oh.
Oh, the height. I think that's right. Yeah, so I think those are the tanks, the height. Yes, I do have that. Right. If I just go to the comparative streeting, because that might help us to visualise. Okay, so the height of the existing building is 8.6 metres. And at the highest point, so the highest point here of the proposed building is 11.8, which is lower than the highest bit of Appeal B here, which was 12.3.
Your microphone's gone off, Gary.
Yeah, it is higher. I can see it is higher. Okay, thank you.
Paul.
I'm always impressed in these situations at how the proposal has developed. either in relation to previous applications and appeals or in conjunction with our officers and the consultation. And I think the result is a very satisfactory scheme. I agree that there's a little bit of blandness to it, but I think the idea of the varying roof height, the way it builds towards the western end, and that I think it's appropriate to have a building of that mass at the end. It signals that. I mean, it is across from a Victorian prison, let us remember. You know, it's quite an imaginative scheme for a constrained site in a historic town. I think it's very good. So I'd be very happy to support it. I like the idea that it's not trying to provide car parking spaces for every property and to promote. I mean, if you look at a Google Street View, it's covered in the roads are covered in bicycles. I think that's a good thing. My one question really is around the affordable housing and the shared ownership. It's important to have, you know, the gesture of affordable housing, I think, is appreciated. If only we could have more. But why shared ownership? Our experience is kind of indicating that shared ownership is particularly difficult as a form of affordable housing, and I wonder whether discounted market housing or something like that could be better.
Perhaps you'd like to comment on the shared ownership.
So I guess the position in this application is that the applicant is of the view that providing the policy compliant affordable housing is not possible, and their viability assessment, that in their view, demonstrates that. But as a kind of, I don't like the phrase, but sort of gesture of goodwill, they've put forward these two shared ownership units. But we have got that mechanism that we would build into the Section 106 to fully review the viability at the point of coming forward for construction. So we have got the opportunity for this to be reviewed and for certainly to get more affordable housing that is appropriate to what we want from that, if the viability at that time demonstrates that it's possible.
And there's also the comment about shared ownership, which we are finding right across the park is more difficult to manage than we had anticipated.
I guess that it would be for the applicant to, I mean, as said in the report, it isn't our preferred tenure, and I've sort of been clear about that, but we've got the opportunity to reassess this with the viability and the opportunity to sort of, find a better solution for the affordable housing if the viability supports it at that time.
Okay, thank you. We've got lots of hands now. Alan?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree very much with I'm not going on about the shared ownership point which has been dealt with. I agree with the first part of what Paul Bevan has said. I'm very pleased that it will be an improvement to this part of Lewes to get rid of the present structures on this site. This is very positive, and in general, I'm happy with the design. I take the point which John Hyland made, and also Paul Bevan's acknowledged to some extent, that aspects that could be slightly bland. I will just make the point, and please don't groan, because it's relevant to the character and appearance of the of most of the traditional building in Lewes. It will be really important in not having these buildings look boring or gloomy, that in particular the red brick parts of the building, i.e. where there are relatively dark or tiled building materials, have windows that are in contrast to that. And the characteristic of Lewes and many towns in England, obviously, is that the windows should be at the detailed stage finished off in a light colour, preferably white or cream, against the darker the darker materials. It's not so important on the light painted rendered buildings, but just as people say the eyes are the windows of the soul, the windows somehow against dark building materials do express something about the soul of the building. It's a bit like the flash of the eyes of a beautiful woman, Madam Chairman, or I suppose, a beautiful man or a beautiful trans person, but I don't really look at them.
You're digging yourself a hole.
Thank you, Alan, for waxing lyrical on that
but
one.
subject to that, I'm subject to that,
Thank
which
you.
yeah,
Thank you.
I'm supporting the application.
Stephen.
I've rather lost my thread, Chair. This is a gateway location, and every development is an opportunity to enhance, to lift, to improve an area. And the baseline for that shouldn't be, is this better than what's there already? That's a very low bar, and it's certainly not acceptable in a national park, and it's not acceptable outside a national park, in my view. In my notes, I've used words like uninspiring, lackluster, tedious roofline. But the presentation and the additional detailing that's been secured by officers has changed my mind. So I thank officers for putting in that effort and creating some interest, creating some elevation change, recession and prominence and brickwork changes. I'm not comfortable with the massing as being outlined by the speaker. There are locations within the overall development that could be enhanced to reduce that, and I hope, given whatever decision is made today, that can be looked at during the iteration of the design, which will inevitably continue. The planning permission element isn't the end of a design, it never is. Things occur, things change, and I hope that can be borne in mind. An objection on that alone wouldn't, though, meet the weighted balance requirement. So objecting on that, I think, isn't viable. Speaking of viability, the local housing need and the lack of affordable housing is of serious concern. Lewis is desperate for affordable housing. And I'm agog that in Petersfield, in not a dissimilar location, we've seen a development of apartments with 100% affordable housing, also in the national park, all with similar constraints. So I hope we can be extremely strict on the viability assessments, because we know that some elements of a viability assessment are sometimes in excess of average and others are below average in favour of a decision. And I hope we can get past that. And I would even go as far as to say the inclusion of the passive house certification, that's very expensive. There are other certification systems that meet the carbon challenges that aren't as expensive. And maybe that's something that could be drawn into the conversation. Because whilst obviously I'm fully in favour of carbon reduction and energy reduction and lower bills for people who live in these properties, it doesn't need to be passive house to be good. So I think those are my comments, and because I can't solely object on the massing element, I'm currently in favour of the development because of the detailing that you've secured. So thank you, Philippa, for that.
Thank you. Would you like to comment?
Thank you, and thank you for your points about affordable housing. And officers do work really hard to try and secure what we can. I think it's important to recognise that an external independent assessor on our behalf has reviewed the numbers, and their advice was, as I've set out, with a clawback clause. And it also is the position that, okay, this is a different scheme and we're a few years on, but I understand that this matter was discussed in detail at the inquiry. Thankfully not with me present, terrifying. But the inspector had reached a similar conclusion here, and that a clawback clause as part of a legal agreement would help to really robustly test this closer to the point of construction. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Daniel.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Stephen has said almost everything I wanted to say, and I agree with it 100%. Just a couple of more specific points. I'm slightly concerned, 28 air source heat pumps in such a constrained environment, is that actually going to work in terms of the effect on people's enjoyment of the open spaces, but given the noise they make and also the way they look. And then my second point is maybe a point of principle as much as anything else. There is an issue about affordability here, and yet highways are expecting £50,000 to be spent on some frankly nice to have real-time information panels on 4 bus stops, 2 of which are likely to be used by the east-west route, are likely to be used by the occupants of these premises. The other 2 on the north-south road are very unlikely to be used. So I don't really see the connection. And could we, by not including those kind of requirements, could we not help with achieving the affordability?
Thank you. So in terms of the air source heat pumps, the building regs are expecting there to be no more gas boilers. So we're really looking to support the provision of alternative forms. And I think it is becoming more commonplace for developments to provide air source heat pumps for dwellings in this sort of density. So I think we're comfortable with that. In terms of the highways improvement, so I guess everything in planning is a balance, and the sustainability or sustainable location of this site has really played into a lot of the design of the scheme and reducing the car provision, etc. I think, yeah, I appreciate the point that money perhaps could be spent on other things, but in supporting the sustainable location, I think that's a really important part of why we've balanced other matters in the scheme. So I think it is important to sort of improve the sustainable access to the site in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, you can.
Just on the response to the first point, I'm certainly I'm not against air source heat pumps, but is there any design? I mean, given that it is going to be a very much an enclosed space, with is there any design mitigation that can be required to actually minimise the negative impact of them?
Thank you. I think it's just an expected design element of new dwellings coming forward now, as reflected in building regulations. So, yeah, I think that's all I would say on that.
Yes or no? Yes. Thank you. I think Gary might have been waiting a long time.
And then Andrew. I've just got three things. I take it what Richard said to us before, the tilted balance and the brownfield site. Would it be, this is a brownfield site, the tilted balance has to come into it. It did scare me a little bit, Philippa, about the review mechanism, and you said it at the beginning, before they do anything. In my own authority, we normally put the review mechanism in after 75% of it's been built, so you then get a better indication how much they spent, and you can calculate if there is going to be any excesses for the affordable housing element. So could you possibly amend that to at a specific point in the building? So, because you did say at the beginning, once they demolished it, they'll have an idea, and then you said about the review mechanism will come in. Normally, you have a specific time when that should be reassessed, and I think we personally in our own district at 75%. I've got one of them later on, so that's what I would urge you to consider in the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. So I didn't mean to imply it had to be done before the development. Apologies if I was misleading there. I mean, I'll be working with Becky, and we've already discussed this in advance to make sure that the mechanism does what we need it to do, and obviously will be agreed as part of the legal agreement. So yeah, we'll make sure it does what we want it to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, Andrew? Sorry, yes, he's been waiting a long time.
Thank you, Gary. But a lot has been said, and a lot which I concur with. And this site is obviously ripe for development, and almost I implied it at the very beginning of this meeting today when I talked about quality, but I think this is a classic example on the site of a place where the quality of design, of materials and of the build turns what could be something that is objectionable into something which is actually appreciated and benefits the town. I noticed that the conservation area boundary was very deliberately drawn around this. I'd like to think that at a review it might be drawn including it, because it would make sense to, because you have to, I think there you are, because that would take out an obvious bite, fill in a bite. But that said, having said all these good things, and I think on balance, if the criteria and build quality comes into this, of course, is satisfied, there is just one thing, and noticing that these houses, a lot of them have slate roofs, were effectively slate solar panels considered as a material, because we've been talking a lot about air source heat pumps and other factors, and there's been mention of passive house, although it's on a very small part of the site. But solar starting from scratch rather than sticking unattractive, and they would be unattractive, especially if it's going to go into the conservation area, unattractive solar panels on the house. This is our opportunity to do the job well and do it properly in the first instance. And has consideration been given to it? And I would suggest consideration should be given to it.
Let's ask the question.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I don't know if the applicant did consider that, but we know that from the scheme that they're putting forward that the CO2 reduction well exceeds our SPD, so they're meeting it in other ways, and I imagine that it would have played into the viability slightly, just as a thought. But so I don't know if the applicant did consider that, but that isn't being put forward for us to consider here, and the CO2 has been reduced via other means through the design of the development.
Thank you. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question in regard to Section 106. The Section 106 outlined highway improvements to local bus stops and clearway markings, a consultation for those. From what I can see on Google Maps, it appears that all local bus stops in the vicinity have bus stop clearway markings and have already gone through a consultation to probably get those. I just wondered which bus stop it was referring to and if it improves the access or reduction in car use to this particular development, or would it be across the whole of the county? Thank you.
Philippa?
Thank you. So somewhere in my papers it does say which bus stops it is, but I'm going to struggle to find it quickly. It might be in the highways response, actually.
Yes, do.
Sure. The Black Horse Pub is the funny building towards the further down the terrace, opposite with the one with a little sort of what looks like a chimney on it. So there's a pair of bus stops round about there, so quite a long way down that road. And the other two are actually up the Gallops, which is the road. If you go that way and turn right, and it's the road with nothing underneath it and houses behind it. You can just read the Gallops. So it's a pair of bus stops there. And those are the ones I'm saying that those are buses that lead to a number of minor villages. So actually very unlikely, and then others into town. So very, very unlikely to be used by the residents of this site. Whereas the other one, the Black Horse one, will be the closest pair of bus stops to the site.
Tom?
I've just checked on Google Maps all of those stops with local knowledge, and they all do have clearways.
Okay, thank you. Right, that's fine. Anything else? Just one point. Our speaker spoke about the height of the apartment adjacent to where he lives and the distance from it. Could you just clarify for us the height of that apartment and the distance from the other apartments, please?
Yes, I have. Oh, yeah, thank you. So from the apartment to Barn Stables, is 12.5 metres, and the height, apologies, so the ridge height of the apartment closest, so here.
That's the lower of the two, yes.
So the higher one over on this side would be 11.8 metres, and it's 11.2 on this side.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So those are within our recommended constraints for distance between buildings and in an urban area.
And a daylight and sunlight
Yes.
analysis was conducted, and that showed that there wouldn't be loss of light to
Right.
those
Thank
buildings.
you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions? Can we go to the recommendation? May I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Thank you, Paul and Alan. Thank you very much. And a show of hands to support the recommendation that's on the screen at the moment. Becky?
I was just going to confirm that that's with the update sheet taken in,
Yes,
the
which is-
amendment that fully mentioned in
Yes.
the oral presentation.
Yes, yes, we understand that. Yes, that's, show of hands, that's all unanimous. Thank you very much. So that's been accepted. Thank you. Permitted. So we'll move to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 8, which is construction of 9 dwellings and associated access road, parking and landscaping at land south of Rothermead in Petworth. Hmm? Yes, a return visit. And Sarah's going to take us through the report. Oh, that's better. Sarah, go ahead, please.
Yep. Okay. So if I can draw members' attention to the update sheet. And also I have a verbal update to read out on behalf of Petworth Parish Council, who have sent a late objection into the application. I'm going to read what they say, which is now available online. It says, the committee appreciate that some changes have been taken place to the layout of the development, but are concerned that the issues of the access to the site has not been addressed. The access is not suitable given its very close proximity to the existing houses in Rothermead and does not take account of access for service and emergency vehicles. So I'll move on to that in my presentation. And you'll note from the update sheet that we had, as a result of the reconsultation exercise carried out after this item was deferred from the last committee, we've had 2 further comments in relation to the revised drawings. One is neutral, that's from the occupier of number 9 Rothermead, who welcomes the changes that have been made to the layouts of plots 1 and 2, but still remains concerned about the access. And we have got another comment, which is a registered objection from the occupiers of number 13 Rothermead, who just consider that the number of units on site is too many. So that's the dates. And I will just try and take you through the scheme now. Oh. So, this was previously at committee on the 9th of April. Since then, we've had some changes to the scheme made. Those have gone online, and we've done a reconsultation exercise to the neighbours and to Petworth Parish Council. I'll just talk you very quickly through the issues raised and then move on to the recommendation. So, at committee on the 9th of April, members were concerned about the impact of plots 1 and 2 on number 9 Rothermead, and also about the detail of the access and the impact that that could have on number 9 Rothermead. Just going to remind you quickly of the site. So we are talking about this parcel of land right down at the bottom. It's an allocated site for 10 units in the Petworth neighbourhood plan. The application has come forward for 9 units. You can see the allocation just down here on the corner.
The number of units on the site stays the same, as set out in my committee report. The mix changes slightly in terms of the market units. So we've now got 2 2-bed units, 2 3-bed units and 2 4-bed units. This is the layout plan, which is the revised layout plan. The affordable hasn't changed in terms of its mix, so that's that block here. We've got, this is plots 1 and 2, for anybody who wasn't at committee. The debate's mainly centring around these 2 buildings. These are the affordable. There's 3 affordable units here. We have another unit here. This is unit 6, and then we've got 7 and 8 up here. This is the access route. Just to remind members, we discussed this last time, but there is a site allocation to the south of the site in the emerging local plan, but the applicant has no right over this access and doesn't own any of this land. So they cannot use this to access this site. However much we might think that that is a sensible option, it's not available to them at this time. So I'll just move on. So this is plots 1 and 2, and I'll set out how they've changed. I do have all the other drawings at the back of the presentation, but we discussed those all at the last committee meeting, and it's all set out in my report. So this is the change in terms of the height. So they've effectively kind of turned these 2 units into a chalet bungalow. So we've got a drop in the ridge height here, and we've also got a slight moving away. If I show you, just go back. You can see this red outline here. That it's very faint, I'm afraid, but that's the line of the former location of plots 1 and 2, and they've cranked it round this way, so it now sits slightly further away from number 9 Rothermead. You can see that as it's shifted slightly further away in these elevations, and you can see the height reduction. It's the height reduction and the smaller roof space that means that they've lost 2 bedrooms, well, 1 bedroom per unit, so 2 bedrooms overall, and that's why we've got 2 2-bed units here rather than 2 3-bed units. I'll just take you on to the sections. And I've set all the distances out in my report, but where we were 10 metres, we're now 11 metres away at the closest point, and 12 metres at the furthest point. So that's these sections here, demonstrating that change. The other matter debated in committee was access. So I'll just show you the site access. The access hasn't changed for the reasons I set up before. They can't change the access to the site because they don't own this land down here. The position of number 9 Rothermead and the requirement to retain this building here as a part of the scheme means that the location, the layout of this access hasn't changed. What we have got is further information before us today. So we've got a number of different sections which set out the distances and the way that this property at number 9, sorry, it's tricky to see from this, is orientated as in relation to the access. So we've got on, I'll find it easier on here. So we've got this distance here shown across, and then we've got here, if you can see, this is the front elevation of number 9. You've got an entrance hall here, and this distance here is approximately 11 metres. And then you've got this boundary wall here, which actually serves a garage in this property. So there's no windows in this elevation. Currently, there's a large conifer hedge sort of around here. That's the closest point between the access road, proposed access road, and the existing property. And that's about 2 metres. So it is very close. In addition to having this further information, we've also got condition 6, which we did have in the previous report, and we strengthened as part of the update sheet, which members will have seen as part of the last report, and that specifically refers to details of the access between the boundary. Just talk about the issues quickly. So just in summary, hopefully I've explained those drawings. The orientation of the plots has been angled away, and therefore they are an additional 1 to 2 metres away from the boundary between the property plots 1 and 2 and the existing property at number 9. The ridge height is approximately 1.1 metres lower, and the eaves height is approximately 1.2 metres lower than previously shown. So that's the changes to plots 1 and 2. And then in terms of the access, it's now detailed in plan form and additional sectional drawings to help officers understand the drawings. We've got the access is in the same position, and it runs between the adjacent garage and driveway of number 9 Rothermead. And the boundary and surfacing conditions of the access are reserved. It got potential access from Station Road is not possible. There has been some concern raised about construction traffic, and we have got a CEMP on the original report, and that's condition 8. And just to remind members that they have done a road safety audit on this site in conjunction with West Sussex County Council, and there are no objections from the Highways Authority. And so there's no objections to the location of the access, the size of the access, the form of the access, and they have provided tracking diagrams to show that refuse vehicles can access and service the site. So as officers, we are recommending it for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have some speakers? So we have no speakers. Oh, yes, we have. I'm on the wrong page. Sorry. So the first speaker we have is against this application, and this is Colin Nutt, who is representing himself and his wife, who are owners of number 9 Rothermead.
Thank you, Chair. Further to our comments that were published on the portal on the 4th of May, we've got some clarifications. The site sections, which Sarah had up earlier, G1, G2 and G3, show the carriageway to be higher on one side than the other. It slopes down to our property. The height is not clearly defined, but at least 250 millimetres. I would have thought this should either be level or cambered to both sides to prevent excessive runoff and slippage. The swept path analysis shows the carriageway is 4.12 metres wide to the 500 millimetre buffer requested by Highways. However, that's measured from our border and not the edge of the retaining wall. So if it was measured from the edge of the retaining wall, it would reduce the carriageway to 3.82 metres, thus failing the swept path analysis. Realistically, with that, no refuse truck or indeed removal truck would be able to negotiate through there. Traffic exiting between two private driveways at an angle where cars may be reversing out seems precarious, indeed, I would have said unsafe. And the swept path analysis doesn't cover the entrance to the access road. It stopped short of that. If it is deemed by committee that roadway details should be by a condition, I think it should be separate from any other condition to ensure clarity, because clearly up to this point, some of the measurements aren't that clear. Also, the ongoing ownership and responsibility for maintaining the access road, the retaining wall and the barrier needs to be clearly defined. Sarah mentioned earlier about the distance between our garage wall and the roadway. It's actually 1 metre, not 2 metres. Rothermead cul-de-sac and the proposed access really is totally unsuitable for construction traffic, in particular heavy machinery. Access from the station road is the most viable. Currently, that access is used by the owners to access and mow the grass within that period with a tractor. So have all avenues for that option been pursued to come through Station Road? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have one speaker in support of this application, who is Chris Mitra, who is the agent.
Thank you, Chairman. Clearly, Sarah has provided a very detailed assessment of the application so far. Just so members are aware, the applicant has been in discussion with Mr. Nutt and discussed all the various changes that have been undertaken to the scheme. In terms of the scale and height and massing, as you've heard, we've reduced the scale and height of the building. It is now plots 1 and 2 are chalet bungalows. Those heights have been reduced down to 7.6 metres from 8.7 metres, as the report suggests, and the eaves height reduced from 4.1 metres to 2.9, so very much more a commensurate scale to the bungalow. In addition, the distances, as has been highlighted, have also been increased to 11.1 and 12.85 metres. So in amenity terms, there's a significant distance between the two properties, and there results no harm as a consequence of that. All of that is outlined in the report at paragraphs 2.1 to 2.7. Picking up on the access points you heard from Mr. Nutt just now, I think it's important to sort of emphasise that this application has been the subject of very detailed discussions. We started pre-apps ourselves back in 2024, and prior to that there were pre-application submissions from 2022. So we haven't knocked this up overnight. We've been working on it for quite some time. And the access arrangements have been very carefully considered, not just by the applicants, highway engineers and designers who have designed the arrangements into the site, but by also West Sussex County Council and by the engineers that undertook the road safety audit on behalf of the County Highway Authority. So although I appreciate Mr. Nutt's concerns about the access arrangements, they are technically all deemed to be acceptable and satisfy all technical requirements. The report does contain conditions that will give, I believe, Mr. Nutt and other residents sufficient comfort that any detailed requirements in terms of boundary treatments between the access and their properties can be properly assessed. They can be consulted on those at the time as well. So in that respect, I don't believe that there will be any adverse impact on the amenity of Mr. Nutt, particularly number 9, and its occupiers. And you've discussed at length today in relation to the Droxford site, the importance of confirmation that highway authorities consider schemes to be acceptable and that road safety audits are submitted. We've done both of those in this case, and we trust you'll now support the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, it's down to you. John.
I shall go first then. First of all, I'd like to congratulate officers and the applicant for the adjustments to plots 1 and 2. Clearly they've answered a lot of the comments that we had before. With regard to the access, I believe that the conditions that are being suggested are sufficient to be able to make sure everybody is comfortable about the access into the site. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, likewise, I welcome the changes to plots 1 and 2, but the access hasn't been positively addressed to my mind. And the reason for that is, as I expressed in my objection when this came to us in April, there is a requirement that developments should not be unduly overbearing, as per paragraph 5.53 of our 3.5 of our local plan. And I think it's worth me stating what that policy says, but because I think it should be clear in our minds. So proposals affecting residential properties in particular should not be unduly overbearing or compromise others' reasonable privacy unless outweighed by innovative design solutions that mitigate these impacts. Innovative design solutions that mitigate the impacts. I think that's important because the key question is whether the amendments achieve that. And given the current access road proximity to 9 Rothermead, I find it difficult to conclude that the development will not be unduly overbearing as it stands. Now, I understand that the southern ownership of that track isn't in the scope. The property to the north, opposite number 9, is, however, owned by the applicant. So an innovative design solution is technically available, it seems. That's for discussion. But as we are at the moment, I think the unduly overbearing clause outweighs currently the positives of the development and could be resolved. So I will be objecting on those grounds as it stands unless members persuade me otherwise.
Thank you. Sarah, do you have anything you want to say? Do you have any comment you want to make?
Yeah, sorry. Right, I'm just going to go back to Mr. Nutt's points. In the first instance, we could...
I'm sorry, we can't hear you very
clearly. Sorry. I was too busy reading my own notes. In the sort of working backwards, we haven't actually got a condition requiring access maintenance and how that will be treated in the future. So we could add a condition requiring the details of road maintenance. The application would be subject to an agreement between the Highways Authority and the applicant in terms of the exact detail of the access. That's something that they would require approval for before commencement, post any decision that you made, but we could strengthen that by putting on a maintenance condition in terms of how that boundary is treated between them. In terms of Stephen's comments, I assessed in my April report the impact of the development on the amenity, and I went into quite a lot of detail on overbearing and sensitive enclosure. And in officers' views, that's not a sustainable reason for refusal in this instance.
Thank you. Gary?
Sorry, Chairman, can I come in as
sorry,
well? Apologies. And apologies if I'm beating a dead horse on this, because you've obviously heard this a lot today. We are in tilted balance territory. You know, for two reasons. This is an allocated site, so actually NPPF 11C is engaged. You should be permitting development without delay because it accords with the development plan. And even if you decide that it's not wholly in accordance with the development plan because of the issue that you've raised, you should then be applying that section 2, part of D, because this isn't a national park issue, it's an amenity issue, therefore you can't rely on one. So when you're looking at that harm that you've identified or potential harm that you've identified, you then also need to look at the benefits of housing in compliance with the allocation, and you should be giving significant weight to those.
Thank you for that clarity. Gary?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wasn't here in April, for that I do apologise yet again. Slightly confused. I mean, I'm looking at the red area, and my colleague Tom Andrews just said about the blue area, which is fair enough. What are those two parking spaces there? Are they visitor parking spaces? They're in the red area of the... I've got another follow-up, if you can give me an answer to that, please.
I can answer that. They are actually allocated to the site 11 Rothermead, which is in the blue area. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, as Claire just said, it's tilted balance. We haven't got a 5-year land supply. Yeah, there's not much you can do about it, so I'm going to have to vote with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan?
I have got no difficulty with Sarah Round's suggestion that a further condition could be added in relation to road maintenance detailing if everybody else agrees with that. But subject to that point, because that came after what John Hyland said, I'm entirely in agreement with the way John Hyland put it. I think this has been tweaked enough, especially against the background of it being an allocated site,
Yes.
To justify permission being granted.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Oh, lots of people. Tom?
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question in regards to the line at the bottom. Am I right in saying that's not public right-of-way? Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Who else had their hand up? Paul?
Thanks. Yeah, last time we looked at the height of the access in relation to number 9, and Mr. Nutt spoke now about the tilt of the road, or the different levels on each side of the road. And I wondered if you could clarify that. I found this. I was still trying to work out what was going on when you moved on to the next
Yes,
slide on this
yes.
one.
Yeah, I'll try and answer that. They're pretty tiny on mine as well. I'll have to zoom in on the screen. So it does slope slightly. So they're cutting down on this side of the road, which is where 11 Rothermead is. They are cutting down into that bank. There might be a slight slope shown. Again, we could add a condition to reserve details of the exact heights, but I would also say again that they will be required to agree this with the Highways Authority. So any slope and any drainage would all be picked up as part of that debate. They have to submit detailed drawings as part of that debate.
In the report, you talk about the 1 metre distance between the property number 9 and the road edge, and saying that's just the garage and there are no windows, and then there's an 11 metre. Could you just point where those are again on that? Sorry, I'm being a bit...
They're very small drawings. So the 1 metre gap is here. So this is the edge of the garage building. And you've got a 1 metre gap between the proposed road and the garage. And then the 11 metre gap is between the sort of main elevation of the bungalow and this. What I could do is whiz on to show you a picture. So can you see this hedge here? So we're cut this light. Sorry, guys. So this is the existing hedge. This is the garage that I'm talking about, and this is the light. So this is the 1 metre gap here, because the new access is coming in. This hedge goes, and it's coming in here, and then the 11 metre distance is from this front elevation, side elevation of the existing bungalow. So that's that distance there. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Good. Andrew.
All I wanted to say is to confirm that I'm going to vote for this because we've I think sufficient issues have been covered. I say sufficient, and we've heard why it is difficult to go too much further.
Indeed. Thank you. In which case, I'd like to go to the recommendation, please, with one extra condition.
Yeah, with the reference to the access, the maintenance potential scheme, the form of words to be delegated to the Director of Planning in consultation.
Thank you. All happy with that? Good. May I have a proposer, please? John, thank you, and Daniel. And a show of hands to support that recommendation. Thank you. And against? 1. Thank you very much. So that is permitted. Thank you very much. So that concludes our DM work this morning. We're now moving on to policy and strategy. And Claire is going to remind us of the report about effective cooperation on the local plan.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is the third such report that you've had. So we provide a report on what was formerly known as the duty to cooperate, once every 6 months or thereabouts. So the report in front of you covers the background, what cross-boundary themes you have agreed we should be talking to neighbours about, summarises the meetings and correspondence that we've had, talks about a particular piece of correspondence that we've had on potential unmet needs that are rising in the national park, and then talks about some statements of common ground as well. So in terms of the background, as I alluded to, the legal duty to cooperate was removed with effect from 25th of March. So it's no longer a legal test for local plans. However, there is still a policy requirement to maintain effective cooperation across boundaries, including on unmet development needs. So that will be tested during the examination as part of the soundness test of the local plan. But the main difference with the previous system is that if the inspector has any concerns about how effective our cooperation has been, those concerns are capable of being addressed during the examination, whereas previously the legal duty was a stop-go right at the beginning, and if you failed it, you had to start again. So just briefly, in terms of the things that we talked to neighbours about, they were agreed with you about 18 months ago now as part of the cooperation and alignment strategy, and they include things like, obviously, how we and our neighbours are both furthering the purposes of the National Park, nature recovery, climate action, etc. Inevitably, a lot of the conversation focuses on the economy and housing when it comes to unmet needs, but also infrastructure and our cross-boundary working on habitat sites, of which we have an inordinate amount. So part of the report actually lists the meetings that we've had over the last 5 months since the last time you were provided with an update. Just picked out some key themes there. We've been doing some work with neighbours down in East Sussex on coastal management of the bit of coast that we have between Newhaven and Eastbourne, which is obviously affecting more than just us, also affects Lewis, Eastbourne and Wealdon councils. We've had a joint approach, lots of meetings on health in terms of how we take into account the health of our communities and work with local health authorities to make sure that the plan is promoting good health. Lots and lots of communal working on habitats mitigation, so things like the Wealdon Heaths complex, for instance, that we work with East Hampshire and Waverley on, where we're seeking to find strategic solutions that developers can contribute to mitigate their impacts. Obviously, a lot of liaising on local plan preparation with ourselves and most of our neighbours progressing local plans either on the current system or the new system, and formal responses to their consultations. So one big piece of correspondence that we flagged in the last meeting was us writing to all of our constituent authorities and our neighbouring authorities about potential development unmet needs arising from the national park. I've gone in the report in terms of 2 ways of working out housing need, one of which our preferred method we can meet, but if the planning inspector prefers the standard method way of working out our need, then we can't meet that, and therefore we would be asking and have asked neighbours to pick up that unmet need. And the other issue is accommodation for gypsies and travellers, which again we have unmet development need for. So we've now, as time has gone past since those letters went out, we have had some responses to those letters. Those are summarised within the report and included within the appendix. On the update sheet, there is an additional one that's now come in from Rushmore. Essentially, the overall message is no commitments have been made to assist for varying reasons, mostly around either not being able to meet their own development needs or being too early in their own plan process to know whether they can or can't. So that's just a map, which again is included within the report, which shows the scope of those authorities that we sent that letter to, which is quite a significant proportion of the South East, to be fair. So as we move forward towards the submission of the plan for examination, the NPPF encourages local planning authorities to document their cooperation with other authorities through statements of common ground. So those are non-binding statements which essentially set out what issues we've discussed with each other and what conclusions we've come to on those issues. So 16th of April, we sent the same group of authorities draft statements of common ground. We'd got 2 signed at the point of the report. We've now got a further 1 signed with Rushmore. And we've got 6 more at the moment in progress. By the time we get to examination, we will have around 32, hopefully, touch wood. And that's not including the ones that we will be seeking with individual site promoters as well. So quite a mammoth task, likely to be quite a weighty document that we're submitting with the plan. So in terms of next steps, I'm expecting at least 1 more report like this to come to you in October, again, just before we submit, showing you the progress, particularly of those statements of common ground. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Claire. There's been a huge amount of work done on this, and it's, I guess it's not surprising that we haven't had any commitment from anybody else to take our allocation or our numbers. We must hope that we are allowed to continue with our 323 rather than being moved to the other figure, which would be absolutely impossible for us and hopeless, in fact. Comments, Gary?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, we had our first iteration of the Reg 19 in my district, and our nice, kind inspector has upped our figures to nearly 25,000 over the planned period. And we have to meet 50% of Crawley's and a nominal fee of 1,500, which, you know, of Brighton's. So I'm not sure we could ever match any from the national park. But what I did find very disappointing about this, to be fair, is everybody's put their heads in the sand and said no. And there's no commitments to our gypsy and traveller sites where we can meet our own in our district. So why, I was going to say something else, the hell couldn't the others meet it? It's they just don't want to meet it. And that's the long and the short of it. They don't want to meet it. And I read it with some slight amusement of Horsham's, because they haven't got a clue what's coming to them. Because they've got the other 50% of Crawley's, which will amount to nearly 4,500 units. And so, no disrespect, but this is slightly out of date, because Claire just said the rules changed. So I'd like to see, perhaps not till October, sooner than later, what the others are going to do. Because if the rules have changed, they now have to help. I do think that a lot of this is going to be, you'll find a different report come October if it stays to October, because they have to meet. You know, the inspectors will say, you will meet. And we've just gone through that. If anybody is interested on Friday, read and weep and cry, because we'll have the sites being up on our website of where we've got to put all these houses.
Well, let's deal with that as it comes through. Do you want to make any comment further, Claire?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is affected by where others are in the process. So obviously Mid-Sussex and Horsham are at examination at the moment, at the sharp end, if you like. Others are progressing, as far as we know, in a similar trajectory to ourselves. Others have recently said that they're not going to be doing that. And others are still, are saying that no, we can't do that we can't submit anything by the end of the year, so we're going under the new system. So yes, there is significant pressure from government and from Planning Inspectorate to find ways of finding solutions to unmet needs, but that pressure doesn't really bite until you're actually at examination.
Tim would like to add something to that.
Yes, just reflecting, I also want to thank Claire and the team, because one of the reasons I suspect, as well as all the pressures of dealing with your own amount, is that because we're using this bespoke methodology and in effect consuming our own smoke, that is being appreciated and supported by the authorities around us. And I know Claire and the team, and we spent a lot of time on explaining our methodology and hopefully seeking support for that. So it's not entirely unsurprising, not only because of the position other authorities are in, but because we're actually saying, with the way we're going, we think we can manage. So if I was receiving that message from another authority, you would end up with this position. I think what we want to do going forward strategically is try and engage with those authorities and see if they can support us in that number as well at the actual examination, because that would be really powerful and would help all parties.
Thank you. Paul?
Just a question on process. On the local plan, we were expecting to have a date for a member workshop, I think in November, after the Section 19 consultation.
Yes, I think
have we got a date for that yet?
I think there's a date in plan, isn't
there? 22nd of October.
Yeah, 22nd of October. Thank you. Andrew?
Of course, this is, I was almost going to say a game. It is a very difficult state of affairs, this, because everybody's sort of shuffling cards around, not knowing what's on the other side of them. For example, two of the local authorities that I've noticed have asked us, what numbers of units are we asking them to accommodate? Well, I pose it to the officers, have we got any clue of that? Because they're effectively saying, are they saying, well, we would consider it if you did tell us how many, but I don't think they would consider it if they did tell us how many. But if we've got this situation existing with 323, what on earth's going to happen if we have more than 3 times that number, or something approaching 3 times that number? It's a completely different state of affairs would begin to exist, and presumably it wouldn't be just us who would face that. It would be a lot of other protected landscapes are likely to face a similar situation. Are we speaking, therefore, to other national parks and protected landscapes to the extent of saying, look, this is the approach we're taking? Is it an approach which is one you're willing to take or you're considering taking, or what advice can you give us, or is it something which we can argue as a body of protected landscapes is a sustainable way, or sustainable in not in the landscape sense, but a good way of going forward?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm going to pick up the first 2 points and pass the ball to Tim on the last one, just to give him a little bit of warning. So, yes, the issue of unmet housing need only arises if we are pushed down the standard method route of the 1,048. If it's accepted that 323 is the right number, then we can meet that. And if you recall, we've also got 10% headroom on top of that. In terms of some authorities coming back and saying, well, where is that coming from? And that's generally the authorities, constituent authorities, who have asked that question, East Hants, Chichester, etc. That is answered essentially within the Reg 19 plan, because that then shows how that need would be divided up and how the supply is divided up between our constituent districts. So when we get to the statement of common ground point, we can be more specific rather than just giving them an overall national park unmet need figure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And in terms of us working collectively as a landscapes body, the short answer is yes. In terms of the national parks, we've all agreed to look at and or adopt, and I'll come on to that in a minute, the bespoke methodology that I talked about. So there's a set of guiding principles, they're called the housing principles, which we're all using to varying degrees. I would say there's an exception because some of the national parks have no problem with the standard methodology because it doesn't make any particular difference to their numbers. So I'm explicitly referencing Northumberland, for example. So, whereas for others of us, such as the Peak District, ourselves and the Yorkshire Dales, who I think are ahead of us and have already used the same company we've done to have a bespoke methodology, but are further down having that tested, are joining forces. And we're also working with the protected landscapes, obviously, national landscapes, obviously different for them because they're not actually producing the plan, but we've shared our thoughts with them, and I know they're talking to their relevant district councils to say you have the option, potentially, if you meet the criteria, to have your own methodology. So yeah, there's a good join up there.
Thank you. Robert.
Claire, can I ask about the risks of it not going ahead at all? Clearly, I'm sure some of you are aware that what East Hants did last night and actually abandoned our local plan just on the fact that we just couldn't see the process completing by the timetable. And having seen a lot of that analysis with the amount of work that's going into PINS in December, with 100 plus local plans going in and PINS not having the capacity to deal with that, I'm just interested in your take on how likely it is that the work we've done up to now is going to result in a successful examination, given all those constraints on PINS, given all the other issues that East Hants are very aware of to do with the MPPF changes, to do with the water issues in the north of the area. There's a huge amount of constraints that have come up in the last 6 months that we weren't aware of 6 months ago. And therefore, I'm really interested from our point of view, how confident you are that the process we're going through is going to lead to a successful adoption of a plan, I'm going to guess this time next year, or whether that's going to slip.
In timetable-wise, it may slip because we know that the planning inspector, as you say, are pretty overwhelmed at the moment. So the Broads experience, for instance, is that they submitted in February. They've not been given examination hearing dates until September. So if the same was true for us, we wouldn't be in examination until this time next year. So that's a slippage from my point of view, not one that we have any control over. I still think that we have a very good chance at examination. We've got very good, strong arguments. We've got a good barrister on board. And I am pretty confident that we've got a good case for our local plan. In terms of the risks of not progressing, you've had a taste of some of that today because, the issue with the 5-year land supply is because our existing plan is out of date and we haven't got a new one in place yet. The longer that gap goes on, the less robust our supply will become and the more difficult decisions you will have to make. And it also then means that we can't give weight to some of the policies that we want to bring in the new local plan as well. So I think the risks far outweigh the benefits in terms of proceeding along our current timetable.
Tim.
Chair, thank you. And if I may, I really want to back up Claire and all the work you've all done. It's a really solid strategy. It's very clear about dispersed growth rather than just homing in on one or two areas. It's very clear about its focus on meeting the housing needs, particularly affordable housing needs. We'll see how we get on. Its commitment to nature recovery, its commitment to climate adaptation, again, we will see. And these are the sort of things you'd expect from us. And I just want to inject some sort of real faith in this. This is the right thing to do, because also we've been out to those communities. They've got certain expectations. There's certain desires they want to see happen or fears that they want to know where the result will be. So this is no criticism to anybody who's taken a different route, but where we are at the moment is exactly where we said we'd be 2 years ago, thanks to so many people, including yourselves, driving forward. There's always an element of risk, but I think, as Claire has said, if we were to change any sort of thoughts now, we'd be far more open to a difficult position. And as you said, twice today we've seen that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Oh, Vanessa.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to come in and back that up as well. I just think all the work we've done and all the consultations with the public and all the bodies that we've spoken to, I mean, local plans are part of our civic infrastructure. They're really important that we do what we say we're going to do and get this in. And we've been working the team, you've been working so hard to get it in for that time. So the idea that we would just go untethered and blind without a plan in the works feels extraordinary to me. So let's just keep the plan in place, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation in front of us. Oh, Gary.
Very quickly, we do need the plan for the seal payments, the 106 payments, and all the rest of it, because without a plan, you won't have that.
Thank you for that reminder. May I have a proposal and a seconder, please, to the recommendation? Gary, thank you, and Alan, thank you very much, and a show of hands for support of that. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That completes this meeting. It also completes my tenure, so it's cheerio. And before we disappear, I'm sorry? Before we all disappear, Rob wants to have a word when we're offline, as do I. So... Okay, we're now offline. Rob.
Yes, members, some of you will